How Her Ex Stole Christmas, a Christmas novella, by Christy Barritt. Chapter 1. If there's one thing I hate, it's having my plans ruined, Kaylee St. James muttered, as she reached between some evergreen branches atop a 20-foot-tall Christmas tree. Below her, in the sprawling living room, where the Christmas party was in full swing, prestigious guests from all over the Charlottesville, Virginia area mingled while a three-piece jazz band played A Marshmallow World in the corner. Servers wearing black and white uniforms weaved between guests with trays of fancy foods perched on their shoulders. This was one of Kaylee's premier events, and she couldn't let anything go wrong. That's why when she'd seen a strand of lights atop the Christmas tree was out, she knew she needed to fix it. The last thing she needed was for the party pictures to show a malfunctioning Christmas tree. Everything had to be just perfect.
We all know that you're a hardcore planner,
Her best friend, Ava Jennings, stood at the base of the Christmas tree watching her.
but you can't plan for everything that might happen.
This was Ava's house, her parents' party. Kaylee was trying to be subtle as she stood out of sight atop a ladder behind the tree. She didn't want to draw anyone's attention away from their elegant evening.
The good news is that the Grinch is out of your life.
Ava crossed her arms and shrugged. Kaylee scowled at the mere mention of the man. The Grinch was what she and Kaylee had taken to calling Kaylee's ex-fiancé, Ethan Sloan. Her ex-fiancé who had broken up with her 3 months ago. Her wedding was supposed to be in 2 days. But Kaylee had been left with both a blank calendar and ample heartbreak. Not to mention questions from friends and relatives that she had no answers for. She leaned farther into the tree, trying to reach the rebellious light string that had gone dark. With her heels and the fluffy tulle of her green dress hindering her efforts, she perched precariously on the ladder. If it's to be, it's up to me. That was what she always said, usually with fake cheerfulness. But as she reached more deeply into the tree, a movement in the distance distracted her. She squinted as she looked through the branches. Why was event security scampering around as if something was happening? Considering the people attending this party, Kaylee knew that security was necessary. There were politicians, CEOs, and a few local celebrities, people who could be targets. But why were the security officers searching the crowds and peering out windows? A bad feeling stirred in her gut. Something was going on. Since Kaylee was in charge of this event, she needed to check this out. But first, the one light bulb keeping the entire string from lighting up.
Can you reach it yet, Ms. Christmas Lights Expert?
Ava asked as she stared up at her. Kaylee had become adept at stringing lights. In fact, people were always calling and asking her to help them. Most people hated putting lights on their trees, but she loved it. Kaylee reached deeper into the tree. I've almost got it.
That's good because Clark will be back any time now.
Kaylee tried not to frown. Clark was her date for the party, but the man, a fitness model, was so self-absorbed that she couldn't stand being around him. She'd been relieved when he'd excused himself to make a phone call. Tonight was their first, and most definitely their last, date. As she glanced at the security guards again while they talked on their comms, her curiosity rose. Just as she reached the pesky light and plucked it from the rest of the strand, the ladder teetered beneath her. Her heart rate quickened. No. She couldn't fall here. She couldn't make a spectacle of herself at the party. She was just getting her business off the ground, and she didn't need any type of mishap to ruin her fledgling party planning reputation. The ladder wobbled more. Ava! Kaylee held out her arms, as if that might help the ladder balance. Kaylee's gaze flickered across the room again as she prayed no one was watching her. Or worse, recording her on video and posting it on social media. As she scanned the room, a familiar figure caught her eye, and she lurched forward. Ethan,
What?
Ava said from down below. But it was too late. Kaylee's sudden movement caused the ladder to begin to fall, taking Kaylee along with it. Ethan Sloan had only one chance to make this work. Unfortunately, that chance was right now at this fancy schmancy party. The good news was that he'd managed to get past the 3 security guards out front. But he knew he didn't have much time until the other guards descended like rebellious elves down the chimney on Christmas morning. He glanced across the massive room, searching for Kaylee. Right away, his gaze found her. She stood on a ladder, appearing as if she were trying to fix something. That seemed like a terrible idea. Kaylee St. James was smart, talented, and beautiful, but she was one of the clumsiest people he'd ever met. That, or she just had bad luck. When she saw him, she stumbled forward. The ladder teetered, her arms flailed. Ethan sucked in a breath. She was going to fall, he realized. Disaster became imminent. She needed help right now, or she was going to break a bone and knock down that tree and end this party early. He dashed across the room. Just as he reached the tree, he positioned himself beneath her. Mere seconds later, Kaylee landed in the crooks of his arms. She looked at him, breathless and wide-eyed, as their faces hovered only inches apart. "Ethan?" He shrugged. This wasn't the way he'd planned on starting their talk, but it would work.
The one and only.
"What are you doing here?" she whispered through clenched teeth. "You weren't invited. I saw the guest list myself."
Good to see you too. You look beautiful.
Her eyes narrowed into a glare as the fact he was holding her seemed to register. She squirmed, pushing his hands away as if she didn't realize that would make him drop her. "Put me down!" Her words came out fast and high-pitched. Carefully, Ethan set her back on her feet. Immediately, she straightened her dress and gathered herself before quickly giving him another scowl. "Why are you here?" she demanded. He glanced behind him as he heard scampering feet. Security? Probably. He needed to make this quick.
I need to talk to you.
And this was the best place you could think of to do that? Kaylee glanced around as if wondering who'd betrayed her. "Who told you I was here?"
It's not important.
He leaned in, his gaze burning into hers. He needed to somehow drive home the seriousness of this situation.
Can I have a moment?
"No, you can't have a moment." The words came out fast, almost heated. "You forfeited that right when you broke off our engagement." His smile disappeared.
I know I did, and I'm sorry, but
"I'm sorry doesn't cut it. You need to leave." She pointed toward the door. "You can't be here."
Kaylee, I wouldn't be here unless it was important.
More footsteps sounded. Guards would be here any second. She held her chin higher. "If you need to talk to me, there are plenty of other places you could have tried to do that other than one of my clients' parties. Haven't you done enough already? Are you trying to get me fired too? Wouldn't that just be the cherry on top for you? Dumping me before our wedding and then ruining my business. Are you that heartless?" She stepped closer, her gaze locked on his. "Is your heart made of coal?"
Cole, really?
Maybe not his best response, but Ethan hadn't expected that rebuttal. "Yes, really." Her hands went to her hips. Dirty, lumpy, stinky coal. He started to reach for her, the longing to tell her the truth panging inside him.
Kaylee, it's not like that.
"Then what is it like?" She cocked her head to the side. Ethan didn't have much time to explain this, because if security didn't reach him first, a deadly crime ring could show up at any moment. Chapter 2. Kaylee's mouth gaped open as she stared at Ethan. Her throat went dry as she observed him in his tux. He looked as handsome as ever, like Henry Cavill. She'd always thought that, and she stood behind the opinion now, even after their breakup. However, he wasn't an actor. He was a consultant who went into companies and told them everything they were doing wrong. The perfect job for a Grinch. As Ethan talked to her, his hands rested casually in his pockets, making him look as if he didn't have a care in the world. The thought made anger burn inside her. He needed to talk to her? Yeah, right. Not likely. The only reason he would have shown up here was to make sure this party she'd planned was ruined. That was just how someone with a stone-cold heart operated.
Is everything okay here?
Ava joined them, her gaze flickering back and forth between them, like someone riveted to a ping-pong match. What had taken her so long? Or had Kaylee's conversation with Ethan really only lasted mere seconds? Seconds that felt like hours? Before Kaylee could answer, her mother, Georgia Lewis, appeared on the other side of her.
You have a lot of nerve showing up here.
Her mom hissed as she stared at Ethan. Her mom wasn't one to mince words. She'd become even bolder since she'd married Richard Lewis, the CEO of a tech firm here in the area, 4 months ago. Kaylee didn't want to think that the marriage had gotten to her mom's head, but she was pretty sure it had. She would never have described her mom as haughty until recently. Ethan shifted, his gaze darkening. Then he glanced over his shoulder at the guards headed his way, before turning back to the women.
Look, this is just between Kaylee and me.
There is no Kaylee in you,
Ava snapped.
and you're not welcome here. How did you even get past security?
Together, the three women stood as a solid force, a force to be reckoned with. They all stared at Ethan, waiting for his explanation. But before he could say anything, a guard appeared beside him. Good. Kaylee raised her chin. As far as she was concerned, he could be dragged out of here kicking and screaming. However, if Ethan left right now, how would she ever know why he'd come in the first place? This was not going according to plan. Operation Christmas Rescue wasn't supposed to be easy. But with an ex involved, it was much more complicated. And it was even more complicated when thus said ex was the most beautiful, most fascinating woman he had ever met. Her lively green eyes and killer smile had won him over from the moment he'd first seen her. Ethan's chest filled with regret as he stared at Kaylee in her elegant forest green dress, with her loose, dark curls gently framing her heart-shaped face. An evergreen twig was stuck in one of the strands, and he resisted the urge to pluck it out. The security guard grabbed his arm.
Sir, you need to leave.
He had one chance to try to make this right and convince Kaylee to help him. He couldn't fail. If he did, it would be a catastrophe, not just for him, but for this country. Maybe even the world.
It's important.
He pleaded with Kaylee with his gaze.
Please.
She continued to stare at him with contempt on her face. Ethan was well aware that if things had gone according to plan, the two of them would be getting married in 2 days. He regretted ending that more than she would ever know. More than she could ever know. Things were much more complicated than they seemed on the surface.
Please.
He repeated to Kaylee. Their gazes caught. He didn't want to scare her, but danger was closing in. Not just danger to them, but danger to everyone around them. Chapter 3. Ethan held his breath as he waited. Finally, Kaylee glanced at the security guard. Can you give us a moment? The guard nodded stiffly before stepping away. Relief filled Ethan. Maybe this wouldn't go south. Maybe Kaylee would listen and understand. Just then, a well-built man, who clearly cared about self-care based on his smooth, freshly cut blonde hair, and his perfect, too perfect white teeth, joined their circle. Ethan tried not to stare at the guy, but those teeth were so white, unnaturally so. He wouldn't be surprised if they glowed in the dark.
Is there a problem here?
The man's chest seemed to bloat with self-worth as he stood there looking at everyone.
No problem.
Ethan kept his hands casually in his pockets, determined not to raise any more alarms. Casual would be his middle name. He truly didn't want to ruin Kaylee's life any more than he already had. The man glanced at Kaylee before wrapping an arm around her shoulders.
I saw you almost fall. I'm glad you're okay.
Kaylee nodded, but she looked ill at ease. Ethan stared at the man's arm around Kaylee's shoulders. Why was the guy draped over Ethan's fiancé? He imagined himself flinging the man to the ground and putting him in his place, deflating his enormous ego, muttering that he should get his hands off her. But he didn't. Still, the flash of jealousy surprised him. But wait! Ethan realized Kaylee wasn't pulling away. Was she already dating someone? Did she actually like this gym junkie? He tried to keep his expression as neutral as Switzerland. He was usually a good actor. He had to be for his job. But he struggled a moment. Clark, this is Ethan, my ex. Kaylee shot him a pointed look.
You're already dating?
Ethan didn't mean for the question to leave his lips. But it did. He thought what they'd had between them meant more to Kaylee.
Day 12.
Ava stated with a shrug. Day 12? What did that even mean? Ava clamped her mouth shut as if she hadn't meant to say those words out loud. This conversation was not helping matters. Ethan really needed to make it move a little faster. The stakes were higher than he was letting on. He didn't want to upset Kaylee, but he didn't have time for games right now. Ethan shifted before starting again.
Kaylee,
But before he could finish his statement, Clark stepped in front of her and glowered at him.
She doesn't want you here. Now leave before things turn ugly.
Ethan almost wanted to laugh. This guy really thought he could take Ethan down? Ethan was a trained operative with the Central Intelligence Agency. He knew how to kill people 48 different ways. Yes, he'd counted them once.
I said leave.
Clark practically growled in front of Ethan. Ethan still wanted to laugh. Based on the looks of everyone around him, maybe he did laugh. Clark glared before motioning to two men in the distance. Security. Ethan couldn't let them interfere. He'd come here to complete a mission, and he wasn't going to fail. He had more than one reason not to, but Kaylee's safety was at the top of that list. Kaylee couldn't believe the nerve of Ethan to show up here, to think that she owed him the time of day, to assume she'd want to talk to him. She'd seen the way he looked at Clark. Sure, Clark wasn't anything like Ethan. She didn't even like Clark. This was only their first date, and she hadn't promised the man anything, nor would she be doing so. But as part of her plan to get over Ethan, she knew she needed to start dating again. Ava had insisted she make it her day 12 goal. So she had. Clark had asked her out, and Kaylee had said yes. Ava had insisted that Kaylee bring him to the Christmas party with her. Truthfully, the man was so pretty that he was a bore. She felt the need to be perfect around him, and perfect was something no one had ever accused Kaylee of being. It was ironic. She was a perfectionist, but she was so far from actually being perfect. It was laughable, really. As the guards began talking to Ethan, Ava pulled her away. Clark remained where he was, as if wanting to see Ethan put in his place. Kaylee's mom also lingered, as if she wanted to hear everything being said. To be truthful, Kaylee wanted to hear also, but it was better if she didn't.
I can't believe Ethan is here.
Ava whispered, as she led Kaylee across the room.
He has so much nerve, but man, does he look good in a tux.
Ava! Kaylee turned and looked at her friend with wide eyes, making it clear that she couldn't believe what Ava had just said. But her friend's words were true. Ethan did look fantastic in a tux, just like Henry Cavill would.
What are you going to do now?
Ava studied her face. Kaylee glanced over her shoulder. Ethan stared at her as the guards each took one of his arms. Kaylee's heart panged with grief, a grief she'd never voice aloud. Only people you cared about could hurt you this badly. It was like a power they had over you, a power they could use for good or evil.
You know what? Let's get some fresh air.
Ava took her arm and guided Kaylee outside. They stepped onto the massive backyard patio with a stunning fountain beyond. A marvelously landscaped yard stretched for several acres, the area around them now decked out in Christmas lights. They paused out of earshot of anyone, and Ava turned toward her.
Girl, you're going to get over him and you're going to live your best life yet. I promise you that.
Kaylee wasn't so sure. She sat on the stone steps leading to the fountain and pulled her knees to her chest, not caring about damaging the green tulle on the skirt of her fancy dress. She just needed a moment to compose herself. Then she'd go back inside and act fabulous, because that was what people expected Kaylee St. James to do. Before she and Ava could talk more, a thumping sound cut through the air. Kaylee squinted as she glanced at the dark sky overhead. Was that a helicopter? Judging by the sound, it had to be. What in the world was a helicopter doing flying overhead right now? It sounded close. Too close. Too low to the ground. Realization filled her. Had someone arranged for some type of present drop? Would someone set up something like that at a party she'd planned without even telling her? She didn't do well with surprises. She didn't know what was going on, but she was going to find out. Ava and Kaylee both remained frozen as they looked up and continued to watch. The copter came into view right above Mr. Jennings's massive mansion. The wind from the blades lifted her hair, probably making her look like a crazed scientist playing with electricity. Yes, the aircraft was that close. Kaylee's eyes widened as she watched a man dressed as Santa swing down from a rope. Santa! This was definitely a present drop. Why hadn't anyone told her? Was someone gunning for her job? Was that why the person had set this up? Panic raced inside her. Could this day get any worse? Chapter 4. As soon as Ethan heard the copter, he knew things had escalated faster than kids tearing into presents on Christmas morning. He thought he'd have more time to convince Kaylee to give him what he needed. But he didn't. Now trouble was here, and Kaylee was in danger. Only she didn't know it. If something happened to her, Ethan would never forgive himself. In one move, he grabbed the security guard to the left of him. Then, he swung the man into the other guard. Their heads collided, and they both collapsed onto the floor. Before anyone could stop him, Ethan dashed back through the house. He had to find Kaylee. Now. He knew exactly what was happening, and he didn't like it.
Kaylee!
He yelled. The people around him stopped to stare, and the live music ended, leaving an awkward silence. Drawing unwanted attention right now was the least of his concerns. When he reached the back door, he spotted Kaylee on the patio. She stood there staring up at the helicopter. Then, Ethan saw Santa dangling from a rope. Santa? Had one of these guys really decided to dress like Santa? Kaylee looked back at Ethan, her eyes wide and full of questions. Some of the facades she'd put up totally disappeared, and the real Kaylee emerged. The Kaylee he knew and loved. Yes, loved. In present tense. Ethan started to dive toward her when someone stepped in front of him and blocked him. Clark. Ethan sighed. Not this guy again.
I thought I told you to leave.
Clark growled. As the man lunged for Ethan, he ducked. His shoulder caught Clark in the abdomen, and Ethan threw the man over his shoulder. Clark crash-landed on his back with a groan. That should keep him out of the way for a while. Ethan's gaze found Kaylee again. She was still staring at him, her mouth agape. A crowd had gathered outside, curiously watching. They probably thought Santa was about to do some grand gesture in the holiday spirit, like handing out gifts. They'd be disappointed. The people aboard that chopper were nothing like Santa or his elves. More like Krampus.
Kaylee!
Ethan yelled her name again. As he did, the copter swung around, and Santa scooped her into his arms. The helicopter veered away and lifted them into the air. Kaylee screamed. Ethan ran to the edge of the patio, propelled himself off the railing, and dove toward them, desperate to rescue her. He extended his hand, stretching as far as he could. But he missed her ankle by probably 6 inches. He landed with a roll in the grass and turned in time to see the copter lifting her higher into the air. As he did, Kaylee stared at him, with eyes full of questions and fear. His heart pounded in his chest. He had to help her. Panic raced through Kaylee. Where were these guys taking her? Where were the presents they were supposed to drop? Shouts cut through the air around her, and somehow the rope began to move upward. Kaylee zoomed through the air even more quickly, Santa's arms circling her waist with a vice-like grip. But if he released his arms, her throat tightened. She'd be a goner. This was not very safe. The helicopter climbed higher. This wasn't a publicity stunt, was it? And why was Ethan staring up at her from the lawn with that look of worry in his eyes? She'd seen him leap over the balcony, coming within inches of grabbing her. Now he was taking off across the lawn as several men began to chase him, but he dodged them all. Where was he going? And did he have anything to do with this stunt? Was he trying to prove something to her? Why did he have to look so capable and strong? Almost like Superman? The thoughts and questions raced through her head. They climbed higher into the sky, Kaylee's hair still whipping around her. Couldn't someone have told her about this stunt beforehand? And where were the presents? Why were they rising higher in the sky instead of landing? The next instant, 2 men dressed in black elf costumes pulled her inside the helicopter and shoved her into a seat. A seatbelt snapped around her. Then the pilot turned to face her. His gaze looked like a dark abyss, void of any light or goodness. Kaylee's blood went as cold as Ethan's loveless heart. She'd never seen this man before, but instinctively she knew he was dangerous, as were his little elves. This obviously wasn't a present drop, nor was it a gesture of goodwill. These men had something nefarious planned, and she'd somehow ended up smack dab in the middle of it. Chapter 5. Luka Novak's men had Kaylee. Ethan had to somehow get her back. That was all he could think about as he sprinted toward the gate, toward the motorcycle he'd stashed just out of sight. How had Luka's men been a step ahead of him? How did they even know Kaylee had what they needed, for that matter? Ethan remembered the gun beneath his jacket. He could have grabbed it and fired, tried to bring the copter down, but then Kaylee could have been hurt also. He couldn't let that happen.
Ethan!
Someone shouted as he approached the gate. He turned to see Ava running after him. He didn't have time for this.
What just happened to my best friend?
Ava caught up to him and paused, gasping in deep breaths of air from her sprint across the lawn. Ethan didn't even know what to say. How much could he explain? Not much. His job didn't allow for that. He slowed to a fast walk.
Why are you running?
Georgia appeared beside Ava, also out of breath.
Are you involved in this kidnapping of my daughter? If you're having regrets about calling off the wedding, this is no way to get her back.
That's not what this is.
He finally said.
It's just a stunt.
It was better if that's what they believed.
She didn't tell me anything about it.
It was meant as a surprise.
Not only to Kaylee and the guests at the party, but to him as well.
Then why are you running?
Georgia repeated, as she struggled to keep step with him. He nodded behind them.
Because security is chasing me.
I always knew you were trouble.
She narrowed her gaze.
From the moment I laid eyes on you.
Ethan couldn't deny it. He had brought trouble into Kaylee's life. Now he had to get her out of it. Before they could ask any more questions, he took off, security guards on his heels. These guys didn't bother to talk to Kaylee on the helicopter ride. It was noisy, and conversations weren't best had with headphones and microphones while in the air. Instead, she took the time to process what had just happened. Rather, she tried to process it. None of it made sense. As they continued to fly farther from the party, it still didn't make sense. Of all the potential high-value targets at that party, she wasn't one of them. If these guys were planning to request ransom for her, they'd be sorely disappointed. Finally, the helicopter began to descend toward a sprawling estate somewhere in the mountains. Kaylee could see warm lights shining from the windows of the enormous house as the copter landed on the lawn. She'd also noted that she couldn't see any other lights nearby. Only darkness. In other words, this place was secluded. Her lungs tightened at the thought. She didn't like the looks of this. After they landed, the pilot pushed some buttons and the blades stopped spinning. The men jumped out, and cranky Santa helped her down. But no one said anything as they led her inside. The place reminded her of something she'd see in the Alps, with its dark trim and intricate woodwork. The place had even been decorated for Christmas and smelled like cinnamon. Bad things couldn't happen in a house decorated like a holiday movie set, and that smelled like snickerdoodles, right? She wanted to believe that. She really did. But she knew better. The evil elves deposited her beside some living room doors and walked away, almost like robotic soldiers. Mission complete. Now what? As she glanced in the distance, Kaylee saw a fireplace roaring in a massive room. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, and stockings hung on the mantel. Really, the place was beautiful. Beautiful, yet somehow cold. How was that possible? She knew it wasn't the decorations or design of the place that gave her this feeling. The people inside caused that. A man sat in a leather chair smoking a cigar. In the dim lighting, she could barely make out his details, but he appeared to be in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, a round face, and hooded eyes. He didn't bother to turn toward her as he spoke.
Glad you could make it.
An Eastern European accent captured his words. Kaylee had never seen this guy before, and she already didn't like him. He had an air of superiority about him, like he owned the place or something. Maybe he did. To make matters worse, the man's cigar smoke stung her eyes, and the stench made her want to throw up. But she knew she had no choice but to cooperate right now. Running would be useless with all the guards she'd seen around here. Instead, she stepped forward. "Who are you?"
It's not important.
He remained facing the fire. I'm really tired of people saying that. A sigh slipped out before she could stop it. He chuckled and barely glanced back.
You're feisty. I like that. But I didn't bring you here to have a conversation. I brought you here to get back from you what rightfully belongs to me.
Kaylee searched her thoughts for what in the world that might be. She literally came up with nothing. What are you talking about?
The diamond. Where is it?
What diamond? Kaylee still had no idea what he was talking about. She wasn't exactly swimming in precious jewels. He scowled, all traces of humor disappearing.
Your engagement ring.
Oh, there was that. Her thoughts raced. This man had kidnapped her in order to steal her engagement ring? The piece was beautiful, and she'd loved wearing it while she was still with Ethan. But to most people, it wouldn't have been anything extraordinary. It wasn't even a full carat. You do realize that Ethan and I broke up. Her hands went to her hips.
But you still have the ring. You didn't return it to Ethan.
I know I didn't. I didn't think it was right for me to give it back, considering it was a gift to me from Ethan. Gifts aren't meant to be returned. There's etiquette to it. The man rose and stepped toward her. Based on his stiff, lumbering frame and unmistakable scowl, he was clearly trying to intimidate her.
Then, where is it?
He growled. Tension filled Kaylee's entire body faster than a tightrope at a pop-up circus. The intimidation was working. I'm afraid I can't give it to you. Her voice trembled as she said the words.
And why is that?
She shoved a loose hair behind her ear. Because I did what any girl with a broken heart would do. She swallowed hard. I had a ceremony with my girlfriends where I threw it into the ocean. Based on the grumble that escaped from deep inside this man, he did not like that explanation. The question was, what would he do about it? Chapter 6. Ethan didn't like to employ this method of finding Kaylee, but he had no other choice right now. As a CIA operative, certain measures had to be taken. He'd always felt bad about the secretiveness of it all. Lying was his least favorite part of his job, but it was for a purpose. As soon as he jumped on his motorcycle and drove a safe distance away from the party, and he was sure no one else followed, he parked on the side of the road, pulled out his phone, and opened an app that tracked Kaylee's whereabouts. Yes, it was intrusive, but it was necessary. When the two of them had been engaged, he'd taken her heirloom diamond earrings to be cleaned for her. She wore those studs all the time. She was sentimental like that. The earrings had belonged to her grandmother, but he hadn't only had them cleaned. He'd installed a small tracker inside each of them. He knew what was at stake, and he had to be able to locate Kaylee if push came to shove. And push had just come to shove when Luca's men had been spotted in this area. One of his colleagues had seen them. Ethan had confirmed for himself, had seen the guys following Kaylee. Somehow, Luca's guys had found out what he'd done. Now Kaylee was in danger. His stomach clenched at the thought. Ethan waited a moment for the map to populate. Then he saw the blinking dot indicating her location. Luca's guys had taken Kaylee probably 30 minutes from where Ethan had currently stopped. If he had to guess, it was the home of a Look Corp investor. Even better, it could be one of the many houses belonging to Luca himself, the owner of Look Corp. Wasting no more time, Ethan headed down the road. If Kaylee were with him, she would marvel at the snow glistening on the mountains around them. Even though it was dark outside, the white blanket covering them was unmistakable. She'd always loved making snow angels when it snowed. The air here was filled with the scent of evergreen, another fragrance she'd always loved. Christmas was her favorite time of the year. In fact, he and Kaylee had met a few weeks before Christmas a year ago, and he had never been happier during the holidays than when he'd been with her last year. She made everything fresh, new, and exciting. An ache formed in his gut at the thought, but he pushed it aside. This wasn't the time to reminisce. Instead, Ethan kicked his motorcycle into higher gear. He had to be careful because these roads could be slick, but he also didn't have any time to waste. Obviously, those men in the helicopter had been able to get away much faster than he'd be able to get anywhere on land. He couldn't believe they'd shown up at the party. But they had. That meant they were emboldened. Somehow they must have figured out where he'd stashed the formula they needed in order to reproduce the highly poisonous mistletoe serum. Things weren't supposed to work out this way. Ethan cruised down the road before slowing as he got closer to the location. He paused outside a substantial fence surrounding a massive estate. Go figure. He let out a sigh. Nothing could ever be easy, could it? He pulled farther down the road and stashed his motorcycle behind some trees. Clearly, he couldn't go through the gate. It would be too obvious. Instead, he cut between the trees until he reached a more concealed area. Once out of sight, he tested the fence. Thankfully, it wasn't electric. But whoever owned this place was no dummy. No doubt they had top-notch security, especially if someone important was here. Wasting no more time, Ethan quickly scaled the fence and landed on the other side. He paused a moment, crouching as he surveyed his surroundings for signs of trouble. 2 guards were stationed by the gate, and 3 men milled around outside the house. No dogs. Maybe whoever lived at this estate wasn't here enough to have canines. Like someone from Croatia, where Luke Corp was headquartered. Nonetheless, Ethan was going to need to keep his eyes open for any surprises. He ducked behind an oak tree close to the house and watched as a guard passed by. As soon as the man was out of sight, Ethan ran in the opposite direction. Then he pressed himself against the house. A door was beside him. He just needed to get in. When he was sure the coast was clear, he started to pick the lock. But when he twisted the handle, the door opened. How fortuitous! Or was it? Ethan's shoulders tensed. Was this a trap of some sort? He stepped into the doorway and glanced around. In the background, he heard people moving about. But no one was within eyesight. That meant if he was going to do this, he needed to do it now. He had to figure out exactly where they might have taken Kaylee. In an estate this big, it could take a while to find her. Especially considering he had no idea how many guards were stationed inside. Kaylee hugged her knees to her chest as she sat on the floor of the dank, dark basement. Cigar Man had questioned her for several minutes before finally muttering something beneath his breath about how he would deal with her later. His guys had then grabbed her arms and escorted her to her current guest quarters. How had this even happened? One moment she'd been planning her wedding. The next, she'd been dumped. Now she'd been kidnapped by Santa and stashed in a basement. Who would find her down here? She had the answer to that. No one. Ava might give it the old college try, but there was no way the fashion designer would be able to locate her. Clark would think he could find her, but he was a fitness model for Pete's sake. He probably wouldn't look away from the mirror long enough to notice she was missing. Her mom? Maybe. She was Kaylee's best chance. Whoever had taken her was clearly sophisticated and capable, with many resources at his disposal. But why would Cigar Man ask her about her engagement ring? Had Ethan set this all up? Had he secretly wanted the jewelry back that badly? He could have just asked. Questions swirled in her mind. Oh, Lord. All I wanted was to pull off this party tonight without a hitch, check off everything on my Christmas list, and get over Ethan. Now here I am, wondering if I'll even live to see Christmas morning. Suddenly, a thump sounded outside the door. She stiffened. Those Goonies were back, weren't they? What exactly had Cigar Man decided to do with her? Kaylee thought she knew. He was going to kill her. She looked around for something, anything she might be able to use as a weapon. But the only thing she found was an old red and white striped pool noodle. Flimsy excuse for a weapon, but she supposed it would have to do. At least it was festive, reminding her of a candy cane. Moving quickly, she jumped to her feet. She raced to the door and stood beside it, holding the pool noodle like a bat. A moment later, she heard another thump outside the door. More fear raced through her. When the door opened, she knew she had to act. With all of her might, she swung the pool noodle into the person who stepped into the room. The person who, unfortunately, simply grabbed the noodle and threw it on the floor. She might be trapped, but she wouldn't go down without a fight. Some type of animal-like instinct came out of her, and she held up her hands as if they were claws. Then she pounced on the person. She gave it a valiant effort, but the man easily grabbed her arms and subdued her. When she blinked, she realized the man standing there was Ethan! How in the world did you find me? She'd never thought she'd be so glad to see him again.
Long story. We don't have time to chat right now.
He blinked.
You attacked me with a pool noodle? Really?
She glanced at it on the floor. I was desperate.
Clearly.
He took her hand.
We've got to go.
Ethan? Yes. She muttered his name again. She still couldn't believe he was here, that he'd found her. In fact, maybe this wasn't Ethan. Maybe Ethan had a twin he didn't tell her about. Her spine straightened as the validity of that idea settled in her mind. That scenario was totally plausible. At least, it was more plausible than the idea that her business consultant, ex-fiancé, secretly had some kind of superhero capabilities. He was the one who avoided his former clients when he saw them out in public. He would take her elbow, and they'd walk in the opposite direction, quickly. It had always seemed very wimpy, she supposed, but she'd also found it endearing at the time. She'd been that in love. Ethan pulled her into the hallway. As he did, a man rounded the corner, a gun in his hand. When the man saw them, he raised his weapon. Kaylee's breath caught. How were they going to get past him? But in one move, Ethan punched the man in his face, and the guy sank to the floor. Kaylee blinked as shock coursed through her. This definitely had to be Ethan's twin brother, 100%. Before she could stare at the man on the floor any longer, the Ethan look-alike took her hand again and began pulling her down the hall, and hopefully to safety. Chapter 7. Ethan and Kaylee successfully managed to get past the guards outside and make it across the lawn to the fence. Snow began to fall from the sky as they paused there. If only they had time to marvel at those flakes. Instead, Ethan boosted Kaylee up and over the fence, except her dress caught on one of the metal prongs. She let out a yelp as she hung there. Ethan! Her voice quivered with anxiety.
It's okay.
He murmured.
I'm coming.
He climbed over the fence and landed on the other side with the grace of a cat, as his colleagues liked to say. Then he reached up, his hands circling Kaylee's waist, and he carefully unhooked her. Just in time. Shouts sounded from the house. Kaylee glanced at the men spilling outside, then at him. That perplexed look lingered in her gaze.
I can explain later.
He took her hand.
Right now, we need to move.
He pulled her into the woods and toward his motorcycle. The ground wasn't easy to navigate, but they'd have to do their best. Ethan! Kaylee gasped in big gulps of air as they ran. He realized she might need a break and paused.
We don't have much time.
I know, but... She sucked in another breath. I'm not sure...
You're not sure what?
I'm not sure my bladder can take this anymore. What? Her bladder? He stared at her with a perplexed expression.
Really? You have to go now?
Ethan had always given Kaylee a hard time because she could only ride an hour in the car without needing a bathroom break. But this was not the time for them to hunt for a potty.
You're going to have to hold it.
He told her.
Let me reword that. Your life depends on you holding it.
Kaylee's eyes widened as she seemed to snap back to the reality of the situation. Although, knowing Kaylee, hearing those words probably only made her have to go to the bathroom even more.
We're almost to my motorcycle.
He said. Your motorcycle? Kaylee drew her chin back, as if she'd just been faced with an alternate reality. But you always said they were too dangerous.
Because they are.
They didn't have any more time to talk. They had to move, now. Ethan began pulling her through the woods again. Finally, they reached his Harley. He jerked off the branches, hiding it, and backed it out. Then he handed Kaylee his coat before climbing on and motioning to the seat behind him.
Get on!
Kaylee stared at it a moment before hesitantly straddling the bike behind him. He handed her a helmet, and, as soon as it was strapped on, he took off. But no sooner did they hit the road than a car appeared behind them. Kaylee saw the car following them, and the pressing need to find a restroom grew even stronger. The blast of cold air from riding the motorcycle didn't help matters any, nor did the icy flakes hitting her skin. But she could hold it. She had little choice. As Ethan had said, her life depended on it. But now she was more convinced than ever that Ethan really did have a twin who was his polar opposite. Sure, Kaylee had been madly in love with Ethan. It hadn't bothered her that he was more of an inside guy. She'd loved him for who he was. But seeing this macho side of him, or his twin, was fascinating, and dare she say, extremely sexy. Something whizzed by her, almost simultaneous to the sound of a bang. A bullet. That had been a bullet, she realized. Her heart pumped harder.
Hold on!
Ethan called. Taking one hand off the handlebar, Ethan reached beneath his jacket. Then he extended his arm and fired. Kaylee gasped. Ethan wasn't the type to have a gun. He'd told her he didn't believe in them. A pop filled the air. Kaylee looked back and watched as the car chasing them began to swerve before finally crashing into a tree. Her relief was short-lived as another car appeared. "Ethan!" she said his name loudly enough to be heard over the roar of the motorcycle.
I'm on it.
Ethan jerked the motorcycle in a 180-degree turn, the tires burning rubber. Smoke literally rose from the squealing tires. A side road appeared, one Kaylee hadn't even seen as they'd passed by. No, not a road. A small parking area. Ethan flew through it toward the woods. Toward another road. No, not a road. It was too narrow. Was this a bike path that cut through the woods? Kaylee couldn't be sure, but it definitely wasn't wide enough for a car. She looked back in time to see the sedan had squealed to a stop. A man climbed out and raced toward them. There was no way he'd catch them on this motorcycle. Kaylee didn't know where this trail would lead, only that it would take them farther away from these men. She pressed her cheek against Ethan's back and held on for dear life. Against her better instincts, she treasured the feel of his strong body against hers. But only in a practical sense, she told herself. Totally practical. Chapter 8. 20 minutes later, Ethan continued down the bike path through the mountains. Earlier, he'd seen a sign advertising an approaching bike trail. Thankfully, he'd been able to find it in the nick of time. For that, he'd be forever grateful. When he was sure no one was behind them, he paused between the trees, cut the engine, and turned back to Kaylee.
You doing okay?
"I think so," she nodded. "Those were some smooth moves you had back there." He shrugged.
Who knew I had those up my sleeve?
"Apparently you did." Kaylee gave him a pointed look. "Now if we have time, I really have to go to the bathroom." He narrowed his eyes.
Fine. Just don't take too long.
He steadied the bike for her as she climbed off. Based on the tension that appeared to snake through her body, she really did have an urgent need to go. He tried to let his compassion overrule his sense of survival. However, doing so could get them killed. Not ideal timing. She pulled her helmet off and glanced around. "I guess I'm just supposed to go in the woods."
That's right. No porta potties out here. Sorry.
"But what about bears? Snakes?"
I'll keep an eye out for you. Just go behind a tree close by. I promise I won't look.
She gave him another searing look before that pouty frown captured her expression. Ethan had always thought it was adorable, especially since she was the most determined person he'd ever met. If Kaylee wanted something, she went for it and didn't let anything hold her back. He'd always admired that about her. She wove through the woods before tucking herself out of sight behind a tree. Ethan didn't want to take his eyes off her, but he did feel they were safe here. He knew she deserved some privacy. "Don't look," she reminded him again as she peered with only her head showing around the tree. He fought a frown, and maybe a little impatience.
I'm not.
"Do you have any hand sanitizer?"
Of course. I always keep some with me.
"Really?" Her voice lilted upward. Ethan dropped his head to the side, rolling his eyes in amusement.
No.
She let out a disgruntled rumble. "Fine, I'm almost finished." But before she reappeared, a yelp cut through the air. He saw Kaylee's arms flailing before he heard a crash. Then another and another. That's when he realized Kaylee had chosen a spot too close to a slope, and she was rolling down the mountainside. Kaylee felt herself sliding, then tumbling, then rolling. She clawed at anything she could find around her: trees, roots, branches, rocks. But nothing stopped her. Momentum pulled her down the slippery slope. What waited at the bottom? An icy river? A cliff? Images of a terrible death filled her mind.
Kaylee,
Ethan yelled.
I'm coming.
But would he reach her in time? As she continued to slide, the skirt of her dress flew up around her. Suddenly, she couldn't see anything except green tulle. She could only feel her backside as it hit rocks, sticks, and scraped across snow. If it were possible, she thought she might be gaining speed. Her body had become its own snow sled, hadn't it? She was going to die like this. She was sure of it. Kaylee quickly tried to make things right in her mind. She mentally said goodbye to all her friends, mentally apologized to her mother for every house rule she'd broken as a teenager, mentally cursed Ethan for getting her into this situation. He truly was the Grinch. I will not wed you near Christmas Day. I will not wed you, whatever you pray. I will not wed you, I do proclaim. I will not wed you, Kaylee St. James. No, he'd do one better. He was going to watch her die instead. Kaylee struggled to do something. Finally, she managed to push her skirt down, but that didn't slow her descent. Instead, it allowed her to see what was coming. She sucked in a breath. Her worst nightmare was coming true. The ground disappeared below her, and she began to slip over the edge. Chapter 9. Ethan raced down the mountain. One wrong move, and this terrain could be his death. But he couldn't let Kaylee die either. As he sprinted closer, his heart nearly stopped. Kaylee was sliding right toward a cliff. If she went off the side, he couldn't let his thoughts go there. Somehow, he found some reserved energy and sprinted forward even faster. Somehow also, he didn't fall. The ground remained steady beneath him. Just as Kaylee's legs spilled over the cliff, Ethan grabbed her arm. She jerked to a stop and let out a moan. Then she opened her eyes, saw Ethan. Relief filled her gaze, quickly followed by anger. I don't know whether to thank you or press charges, she muttered. The jury's still out.
Let's wait on both of those.
Ethan braced his feet.
First, let me get you up here.
She glanced down, and her face went pale.
Don't do that.
He murmured as he reached for her.
It will only make things worse.
She closed her eyes. Please, don't let me fall.
I won't.
He reached farther down Kaylee's arm and pulled her atop the cliff. She lay there a moment, catching her breath, her skirt gathered around her, her hair tumbling over her shoulders. He knelt beside her.
Are you okay?
Finally, Kaylee opened her eyes and glanced up with a scowl. Now I am. Thanks. I guess.
I'd love to stay here so we can continue razzing each other, but we really need to get going. Can you walk?
Let's hope. Ethan stood and helped her to her feet. After a moment, she found her balance and took a step. She might be sore for a while, but she was otherwise okay. That was a relief. Ethan began helping her back up the mountainside to his cycle. When they reached it, Kaylee looked at him, her eyes still narrowed. Mud covered part of her face and hair. Her dress was ripped. But she was alive. That was the important thing. And she still looked as beautiful as ever. What now? She frowned. I know my mom and Ava have got to be worried about me.
And Clark?
Ethan raised an eyebrow as he watched her expression. Kaylee's head and neck twitched, as if she hadn't expected to hear his name. Then her expression cleared. And Clark. Yes, of course. Clark has to be worried about me as well. Why wouldn't he be? It's only natural. But something about the way she over-explained it made Ethan think that things weren't as serious between her and Clark as she'd initially led him to believe. A small sense of satisfaction coursed through him, however short-lived it may be.
We need to find somewhere to lie low for now.
Ethan shifted, knowing he couldn't allow himself to get distracted.
And you can't call anyone.
Her lips parted. But
Anyone you tell about this will be in danger. You can't risk that.
why?
I'll explain later. We really don't have time right now.
Kaylee clamped her mouth shut before finally asking, "Where are we?" He sighed and glanced around.
I think we're about 40 minutes northwest of Charlottesville, farther into the heart of the mountains. I need to figure out somewhere we can go where people won't find us.
Suddenly, her eyes lit as if she had an idea. "Believe it or not, I know just the place." Chapter 10. As Kaylee rode on the motorcycle, Ethan's jacket over her once bare arms, she actually felt herself relax a moment. That was something she never thought she'd say. After all, she was on an icy mountain road with the man who'd broken her heart, with nothing but air between her and the asphalt. But something about this moment made her feel she could trust Ethan. Though she couldn't trust him with her heart, maybe, just maybe, she could trust him with her life. Even so, she would need to keep plenty of boundaries in place. Just as before, as a matter of comfort, she turned her head and pressed her cheek into his back as they rode. The mountain air was so fresh, albeit cold right now. Snow dotted the landscape, and pine trees spread their fragrance throughout the air. Kaylee gave Ethan a few more directions. With each new instruction, the road around them became narrower. At least, no one was behind them. Finally, they turned onto a gravel road and climbed higher on the mountain. She sat up straight and glanced around at the firs and spruces that rose around them. Almost there, an old Christmas tree farm. One of her clients, Ballaster Boulderward, had just purchased it, and Kaylee was helping him plan a grand opening party. He'd hoped to do the event in time for Christmas this year, but it hadn't worked out. He planned on making this a year-round destination that would not only be a Christmas tree farm, but also feature overnight accommodations, an ice skating rink, sleigh rides. In the summer, there would be hiking and wine tastings. Because of that, they'd figured there was no hurry. It did, however, work out for her right now, because this was the perfect place to hide. Since Kaylee had been here before, she knew that at the center of the property was a large lodge, the perfect place for them to stay. A moment later, Ethan pulled to a stop behind the building. Kaylee carefully climbed from the motorcycle and held out her arms on either side of her as she found her balance. Her legs felt like jelly. Ethan, on the other hand, climbed off and stood, seeming as solid as an ancient oak tree. She resisted a scowl. Was there anything that rattled the man? He caught her arms and stared deeply into her eyes.
Are you okay?
All the breath left her lungs, but not because of fear, because of exhilaration. The exhilaration of escaping from a dangerous man, of the chase, of the motorcycle ride, of seeing Ethan again. She'd missed him so much. As a coping mechanism, however, she'd convinced herself she didn't want him in her life anymore, that she was better without him, that he wasn't worth her grief. Memories of their breakup crashed back into her mind. She couldn't let herself forget her pain. The walls she'd almost let down went back up, 10 times higher this time, and made with double reinforced steel. Kaylee's jaw tightened. There was no way she was going to let this man hurt her again. No way. For a moment, Ethan had seen Kaylee's gaze soften. Then, just as quickly, any warmth in her eyes had disappeared. He couldn't blame her. But a man could hope. Maybe if Kaylee listened to his explanation, she'd understand. Maybe, but most likely not.
We should probably get inside.
He took her arm and nodded toward the dark, deserted lodge.
It will be safer there.
Of course! They went to the door and rattled the knob. But it was locked. Kaylee started to suggest finding a rock to break a window, but Ethan already had a lock-picking kit out. He worked the mechanisms until he heard a click. The next instant, he pulled the door open. Kaylee stared at him, that same dumbstruck look in her eyes. "Aren't you just full of surprises?" He shrugged.
What can I say?
He ushered her inside, careful to lock the door behind them. Then he glanced around the lodge. A counter stretched on one side, probably where guests had paid for their trees. An old gift shop sat on the other side. In front of him stood a massive stone fireplace that stretched upward 2 stories. Couches and chairs were clustered in front of it. Wooden railings lined the second story. It was nice, cozy, slightly forgotten. He glanced back at Kaylee.
What's your connection to this place?
Kaylee scanned the place also. This lodge used to be a premier destination for families looking for the whole Christmas experience. Then, last January, the owner decided he wanted to retire. No one in his family wanted this place, so a man named Ballastar decided to buy it. He had a few financial issues pop up, so it took longer than Ballastar expected. He wasn't able to open for the holiday season this year.
What's your connection then?
She waved her hands in the air as if visualizing what she was saying. When it opens, he wants me to plan a big opening night for him. It will be a fundraiser to benefit local children in need. I know it sounds crazy, but he decided he wants this event to be a big after-Christmas party here in January.
In January?
She nodded. Ballastar would like for this place to be a year-round destination. It has to be if it's going to be sustainable, I suppose. She headed across the lobby area to a room behind the front desk and pointed inside to a stack of boxes and various decorating materials. Those are some of the things I've brought by over the past couple of weeks. Items we'll use to decorate this place to make it a handcrafted event. Ethan raised an eyebrow.
Any chance this guy will be coming back here anytime soon?
He's actually in California visiting his family, so we should be good.
Does he have an alarm system?
Not yet. I just asked him that last week. Ethan relaxed slightly at her words. He glanced at Kaylee and saw her glancing around the lodge, her eyes bright.
You like this place, don't you?
He asked. I do. Ethan loved it when Kaylee's face lit up like that. It meant she saw something full of possibilities. At one time, she'd looked at him like that. But no more. Disappointment pressed on Ethan. Unfortunately, they weren't here to talk about their relationship. They were here because he had to find out what Kaylee had done with some very important information. But he was going to need to proceed very cautiously. Too much was at risk to allow any mistakes. Chapter 11. 10 minutes later, Kaylee watched as Ethan started a fire in the massive stone fireplace. She figured the move was risky since someone could see the smoke from the distance. But hypothermia was also a risk. Her dress, now torn and battered, wasn't going to cut it in these 30-degree temperatures. Once the fire was blazing, Ethan pulled the couch closer and found a couple of old blankets. The two of them remained a comfortable distance apart as they stared into the flames. But Kaylee had questions she could no longer delay. I need to know the truth. She turned toward him. What's going on? He sighed. Certainly, he had to know this question would come up. He couldn't just skate by, acting as if everything that had just happened was normal. He let out a long breath and leaned forward with his elbows perched on his legs.
The truth is, I work for the CIA.
Kaylee tried to keep her expression composed. This was a joke, right? It had to be. It was just as crazy as her twin brother theory. In fact, maybe it was crazier. Keep going. She remained cautious as she listened.
I've been involved in a top-secret operation for the past 6 months.
So right after we got engaged, this operation came up? Kaylee would go along with his little farce for a few minutes. She wanted to see where he was going with this.
That's right. Unfortunately, the consequences, if I don't succeed, they're dire. Not just for me, but for a lot of people.
He frowned before rubbing a hand over his mouth. You mean, for the world? Surprisingly, Kaylee kept the humor out of her voice and sounded halfway serious. Ethan's shoulders softened, almost as if he were relieved that she understood.
Yes, exactly.
She nodded slowly. I see. And why are you back now? His gaze locked with hers.
Because I need your engagement ring.
She stared at him another moment, waiting for him to break into a grin and say he was joking. He didn't. Yeah, well, I hate to tell you this, but I'm CIA also, she said. I was sent undercover to keep an eye on you. How else do you think I survived that Santa abduction? Besides, an event planner is the perfect cover to spy on high-value targets and gain access to private offices. Ethan reeled back in shock. That's when Kaylee could no longer hold back her thoughts. She burst into laughter so strong that her sides hurt only 1 minute in. But Ethan remained upright, almost looking confused. How can you look so serious when you say something like that? She asked between rounds of laughter. How many times did you have to rehearse this little speech in order to say it with a straight face? I'm going to give you credit. You almost look like you believe your own words. His expression remained unchanged, or maybe a little hurt.
Kaylee, that's because I do.
Her laughter faded. Then she shook her head. She couldn't let herself be jerked around by this guy any longer. Her gaze locked with his. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I think I'm ready to get off this ride. She stood, ready to figure a way out of this herself. If she could find a phone, she could call someone. She could post on Insta that she'd been kidnapped by her crazy, heartless ex-fiancé. That would get some attention. But then Ethan touched her arm. Electricity raced through her. She froze and looked back at him.
Kaylee, I know how this sounds, but I'm not joking. I'm dead serious.
Ethan should have figured that would be too easy. Of course, his story sounded outlandish. But somehow, he had to convince Kaylee his words were the truth. Because they were. He stared at Kaylee, waiting for her response. When she said nothing, he repeated himself.
I'm dead serious.
She stared.
Please, sit down and listen.
He tugged her arm.
I can't let you leave.
You can't let me leave? A hint of indignation rose through her voice, and she broke away from his hold. No, she didn't like to be bossed around. Ethan used to like that about her. But now her life was in danger. He prepared to catch her if she decided to bolt. She wouldn't get far. I'm done with this. She took a step toward the door. I need to call Ava or my mom and… Ethan stood, towering over her while blocking her exit. He didn't want to intimidate her, but he did need to reach her somehow.
Kaylee, I'm not joking.
He kept his voice low and serious.
Please, listen to me. Please.
Suddenly, all the giddiness left her eyes. Fear replaced it. She lowered herself back onto the couch, pulling the blanket around her. Fine. You have 5 minutes to convince me that you're telling the truth. Then I don't care what you say. I'm leaving here with or without you. Ethan had no doubt she was serious.
There's this company in Croatia,
He started as he sat next to her.
a pharmaceutical company. It's owned by a man named Luka Novak. One of the scientists at this company developed what they call the mistletoe serum.
She gave him a look. The mistletoe serum? Really? What does it do? Make those infected want to kiss each other?
I promise, that's really the name. It causes a rash that turns your skin red and rosy like Santa's cheeks. If the rash spreads to your airways, it can be fatal. And it can be spread through touch, kissing specifically.
Thus, it became the mistletoe serum? She shook her head. She hadn't been that far off the mark. Ethan seemed to give her a moment to let that sink in. Finally, she shrugged and twisted her head in confusion. What does this so-called serum have to do with you?
I was able to steal the formula and erase all copies of it. But a week later, the scientist who developed it was killed in a tragic car accident. That means the copy I have is the only one that exists.
Her eyes widened. Wait! You killed him?
I didn't kill him.
Ethan pointed to himself.
I'm not sure who did.
Why didn't you destroy that last copy?
We need it so we can analyze it and prevent someone else from coming up with something similar.
So where is this formula? Kaylee stared at him as she waited for his response. Ethan leaned closer, a frown flickering across his face.
I hid it in your engagement ring.
Chapter 12. Wait! Kaylee could hardly comprehend what Ethan was telling her. You put a top secret, potentially deadly, sought after by terrorists, formula, in my engagement ring? Why would you do that? Ethan's expression showed no signs of contrition.
Because I know how much you love your jewelry and that you take good care of what you have. I also know how sentimental you are. I knew that would be the safest place to keep it, somewhere that these guys would never think to look.
It sounds to me like you were putting me in the line of danger. She crossed her arms as she glared at him. On purpose.
It's not like that.
His jaw twitched with obvious tension. But then you broke up with me and left me with the ring? At the absurdity of her words, she threw her hands in the air. This isn't making sense. I hope you can understand how crazy this sounds.
I do understand. The situation is complicated, much more so than I ever anticipated. Not long ago, there was a small outbreak of people with symptoms matching those caused by the mistletoe serum in a small Croatian town. That's when we realized how much damage this could really do.
That sounds terrible.
When I realized the lengths people would go through to get this information, I knew I had to call things off with you. It was for the sake of our country, for the greater good. Besides, these guys would never think that I left information with someone I was no longer engaged to.
Okay.
And to be honest, I saw some suspicious people following you when you were out shopping.
When I was out shopping? She repeated. Wait, you've been watching me? His cheeks may have flushed a little.
I was trying to keep an eye on you. I had to make sure you were safe.
People were following me? His jaw tightened again.
Yes, on more than one occasion. Once I saw Luca's guys were in town, I knew something was up.
Kaylee stared at the fire, none of this making sense. So Ethan, a CIA operative, had broken up with her for the sake of his country? He loved her, yet he'd put her in a position where she could be killed? She didn't even know what to think. How exactly did you store this information in my ring? She shifted toward him, wanting to see his eyes.
You probably remember that my dad was a jeweler, right?
You mentioned that.
He taught me some of his skills, and I thought they could come in handy for my job with the CIA.
Still listening? She narrowed her eyes as she tried to process this.
Anyway, I designed your engagement ring, and when I did, I placed this formula on a microchip that I then planted beneath the prongs that secure the diamond in place.
Her thoughts continued to race. Why didn't you take this formula straight to one of your superiors? A barely perceptible frown tugged at his lips.
Because I don't know who I can trust. I suspect someone at the agency may be in the pockets of the terrorists who developed this serum. They think I accidentally destroyed it. At least most of them do.
What's that mean?
I mean, I think there's something going on there, but I haven't been able to figure out what yet.
Kaylee shook her head, which had begun to pound. I honestly just don't know what to think right now. This is surreal.
Kaylee, this is important.
He leaned closer.
Where is that ring?
She opened her mouth, trying to form her response. He wasn't going to handle the truth well, and she wouldn't be able to blame him. But it wasn't her fault. She never thought she'd see him again. Before any words could leave her lips, a scratching noise filled the air. It came from one of the nearby windows. Goosebumps spread across her skin. Had those guys found her and Ethan? And if they had, what exactly would they do to her and Ethan as they tried to find this top-secret information? Pull their fingernails off one by one. Make them listen to unending Mariah Carey Christmas songs. Dunk them in vats of hot chocolate until the liquid nearly drowned them? Or would they do worse?
Stay here and don't move.
Ethan barked. Kaylee scooted over to a chair against the wall and out of sight. He grabbed his gun from his holster and held it in front of him. Then he rushed toward the wall and plastered himself against it. Slowly, he peered around the edge of the window. Had Luca's men somehow realized that there were trackers in Kaylee's earrings? He also found that hard to believe, but he needed to consider every possibility. The scratching noise sounded again. Ethan peered ever so slightly around the window. Worst-case scenarios raced through his mind. Someone cutting the window screen, planting an explosive, planning a sniper attack. The air left his lungs when he saw the true source of the sound. A buck stood outside, rubbing his antlers against the side of the lodge. The creature looked up and spotted Ethan. The next instant, it darted toward the woods surrounding the place. Ethan? Kaylee's voice sounded frail as she appeared behind him. He shoved his gun back into his holster and turned toward her.
It's okay. Just a deer.
Her slumped shoulders showed her relief. Thank goodness! She peered out the window. Oh, look at it. It's so beautiful. It reminds me of a reindeer, like Rudolph.
How very Christmassy of you.
Amusement captured his voice. Kaylee continued to stare outside. I know you can't see it right now, but there's a lake here on the property. About 15 feet from the shoreline, there's a cluster of trees on a tiny island. But anyway, Mistletoe grows on those red maples, and the previous owners used to decorate those trees every year.
Sounds nice. How did they get to it? By boat?
There's an old, rickety pier that leads to it. And when I say rickety, I mean rickety. It's only a foot wide and uneven. I told Ballastar he should fix that it's a safety hazard. But everyone around here, when this place was in its heyday, used to love Mistletoe Island. I can't even tell you how many proposals happened there. Kaylee was rambling. But he liked hearing her stories. The problem was they didn't have time for all these stories right now. Ethan pulled her back to the couch and sat down next to her again. Closer this time. She didn't push him away or scoot back to put distance between them. At least, that was a start. Somehow he had to convince Kaylee he was telling the truth. His gaze locked with hers.
You've got to tell me where that ring is.
She opened her mouth before shutting it again. Finally, she started. That man at the house. Who was he? He asked me about the ring. Ethan's eyebrows rose.
He did. Did you tell him where it was?
Who was he? She repeated.
I'm not sure if it was Luka Novak or one of his men. What did you tell him?
She frowned. I told him I had a party and threw it in the ocean. Ethan's heart beat harder. That didn't sound in character with her at all. Kaylee was the sentimental type. She appreciated the value of things. Ethan had never thought she'd take things to that extreme. The thought of her discarding the ring stung. Not that he had any right to feel that way. But still, he glanced at her and shook his head.
You did?
Kaylee gave him a sideways look. No, of course I didn't, but he didn't need to know that. Ethan's heart slowed a moment.
Then where is it?
A touch of embarrassment filled her gaze before she shrugged. I made a craft out of it. Chapter 13. Kaylee watched Ethan's expression as his eyes narrowed and his bottom lip dropped slightly.
You did what?
He nearly screeched the words. She shrugged. I couldn't figure out what to do with the ring. I didn't want to take it to a pawn shop or sell it online. So I decided to make an ornament, and I realized the diamond would be beautiful as... She rubbed her throat. As the Star of Bethlehem.
What?
He didn't bother to hide the frustration in his voice. She shrugged again. Ethan had lost the right to give any input into her life when he'd broken up with her. It really turned out beautiful, if I do say so myself, she murmured. And I'll keep that ornament for the rest of my life. Every time I see it, I'll remember that my hope was born in a manger and shouldn't ever be found in a man. He blinked as if he didn't know how to react. Finally, he squared his shoulders and cleared his throat.
Where exactly is this ornament now?
At my mom's, on her tree. He ran a hand over his face.
I see. I need to get it as soon as possible. But we should wait until it stops snowing.
Do you think we have that much time?
We don't have much choice. The roads are getting icy. We're not dressed appropriately. And I definitely can't leave you here by yourself.
She looked around the quiet lodge. The only thing stirring was the fire in the fireplace. She didn't exactly want to sit around and play 20 questions with her ex. She fought a frown. What do we do in the meantime? He glanced around.
We take it easy. Stay warm. Then we'll leave in the morning. Sound good?
Kaylee wasn't really thrilled at the idea of spending more time with Ethan, even if he did claim that he'd broken up with her for the greater good. That could just be an excuse, a way of guilting her into seeing things his way. Even if it wasn't, Ethan shouldn't have toyed with her heart like that. If he'd known she would be in danger just by being with him, then why had he proposed in the first place? Sure, she didn't know the ins and outs of the CIA's protocol. She knew they were secretive and had rules to uphold. But really, why hadn't he just told her the truth? Kaylee could have helped him hide the formula. She was creative that way. After all, she had placed the ring where no one would ever suspect, hadn't she? Who would possibly think to look on her mom's Christmas tree for it? She pressed her lips together as emotions roiled inside her. Ethan stood and let out a breath, looking as if he sensed her need for space.
Do you want me to see if I can find something to eat around here?
His voice sounded quiet, almost as if he didn't want to set her off again. Kaylee shook her head. I'm not hungry. I grabbed a few bites to eat at the party.
You have been eating enough, right? Because you look like you've lost weight.
There was no way she would admit to Ethan that she'd dropped 10 pounds since they'd broken up. Did he even understand the heartbreak she'd been through? The tears she'd cried? The chocolates she'd eaten? She crossed her arms. I'm fine. He hesitated before sitting beside her, and they both stared at the fire another moment. Finally, he asked,
It's funny that we're here. Didn't you always want to get married at a Christmas tree farm?
She cast him a sideways look. He was brave, very brave, to bring that subject up. I did. Tension crackled in her voice. But you said the weather was too unpredictable to have an outside wedding this time of year. Remember that?
I was actually thinking about all the places a bad guy might be able to hide. All those trees could be dangerous. I just couldn't tell you that.
Kaylee shook her head. This didn't even seem real. For the longest time, she'd dreamed about what it would be like if Ethan were to come back into her life. If they had a second chance. She'd known she would never meet anyone who made her feel the way Ethan did. Then that hope had died and turned into bitterness, she supposed. Now, here they were. Kaylee was going to have to suck it up and spend the foreseeable future in Ethan's presence. She literally had no other choice at this point. Not if she wanted to live. An hour later, Ethan had found some sweatshirts, sweatpants, and socks in the old gift shop. Some more searching had led them to the discovery of a lost and found box as well. They both pulled out some more reasonable shoes and jackets from that. Those would help them stay a little warmer. Furthering their search, they'd found some old bags of pretzels and peanuts that weren't expired. Then they sat down in front of the fireplace again. Ethan tried not to talk too much. He knew this was a lot to comprehend, and he didn't want to overwhelm Kaylee. Deep inside, she was a perfectionist, and he knew it killed her when things didn't go the way she'd planned. When they dated, his goal had been to get her to loosen up, and it seemed to be working for a while, until his mission had gone upside down.
What are you thinking about?
Ethan finally asked Kaylee as she stared into the fire. Honestly,
Of course.
I was thinking about the first time we met. She frowned. It should have been obvious from the very start that we were destined not to be together. He might be offended, but he couldn't deny her words. Everything that could have gone wrong had. I was in the changing room at that clothing store, and I had a dress stuck over my head with my arms in the air, and I couldn't move. I couldn't get it off, and I was starting to feel like I couldn't breathe. Her cheeks reddened.
Then I heard you calling for help.
Ethan felt himself smile at the memory. And of course, when I called for help, I was really meaning from the sales clerk, not a strange man who just happened to be nearby.
Sorry, but there was only one clerk working, and she'd stepped out the front door to have a moment alone with her boyfriend. When I heard you, I assumed something was wrong, that you were in danger. You sounded seriously distressed.
An adorable frown tugged at her lips. Now it makes sense how you were able to break down the door to the dressing room so quickly.
I may have fibbed and told you it was unlocked.
But I clearly knew that it wasn't, because I always lock doors in dressing rooms. Then I had to realize with horror that a man was seeing me with a dress stuck over my head and arms.
Thankfully, you were wearing a lot of things underneath the dress, so I didn't see much.
He hid his smile as he remembered Kaylee's reaction when she'd heard his voice. She'd ducked and tried to cover herself, but she couldn't because her hands had been stuck above her head and she'd nearly toppled over in her panic. Ethan was telling the truth when he said that he wasn't able to see much, but he knew the whole incident had been embarrassing for her. After several minutes of talking, he'd asked if she wanted him to call someone. She'd said no, said it would take too long. She had a Christmas party to get ready for that evening. Finally, he'd been able to convince her that he wasn't a creep. Then, he'd managed to get the dress zipper unstuck, and he'd stepped away. When he was checking out, Kaylee appeared behind him in line, her cheeks red. Right then, Ethan had known he was fascinated with this woman. Then, you being you just so happened to strike up a conversation about what I did for a living. Kaylee stared at the fire as if lost in thought. I figured you were trying to put me at ease. That's why I told you I was an event planner.
Then I told you I had a very important date I was planning with a very special woman, and I needed your help setting it up.
Kaylee pressed her lips together in a flattened frown. To which I said that I didn't usually plan dates, but then you told me how much you'd be willing to pay me to help, so I said yes. His grin widened.
The look on your face when you realized that the date you were setting up was actually for you and me, it was priceless.
That seemed to get an earnest smile out of her. That was shocking, to say the least. She shook her head. It just doesn't seem like you were in a good place to date. Why did you even ask me out? The conversation suddenly turned serious. Ethan frowned as he remembered his inner struggle at the time.
I didn't plan to, but from the moment I saw you, I couldn't stop thinking about you.
Kaylee's eyes widened, and her cheeks turned red again. But she quickly looked away and stared back at the fire as if she didn't know what to say. After a few minutes of silence, she cleared her throat. You know, I always thought. But before she could finish, another noise sounded at the window. Was the buck back again? Or was this something different? Alarm raced through Ethan. He needed to find out. Chapter 14. Kaylee frowned at the sound. The deer must have come back. It was probably better to have the interruption. She'd been about to tell Ethan how much he'd meant to her. Those thoughts were best kept to herself, however. She'd simply been caught up in the moment. As he checked out the sound, Kaylee remained curled on the couch in front of the fire, thinking about how things could have been between her and Ethan, which was never wise. Yet she couldn't seem to stop herself. She'd had visions of cozy Christmas mornings, of a house full of kids, of a lifetime of memories. She glanced at him now. He wore black sweats and a red sweatshirt. The man could look good in anything, and he did look good in anything. Talking about how they'd met filled her with a bitter sweetness. She'd been so embarrassed and humiliated in that dressing room, yet Ethan had done everything in his power to put her at ease and make her feel like she wasn't a freak. She hadn't been able to get him out of her mind after their meeting either. Then he'd looked up the name of her business. He called 4 days later and said he wanted to hire her. He'd explained that he'd met a wonderful girl, and he wanted to set up a memorable date with her. He needed help. Kaylee had told him she would help. They'd gone back and forth about what he should do. They'd ended up setting up a romantic dinner at an Italian restaurant, followed by a drive around the city to look at Christmas lights. The evening had ended with cookies and milk at a little coffee shop in town. The whole time Kaylee had been setting up that date for him, she'd commiserated about it. Of course, he'd had already been dating somebody. He was that kind of guy. Then Ethan had called with a last-minute emergency and asked her to come to the restaurant. He said there was a problem that only she could handle. She'd been dressed in ratty jeans and a Christmas sweater when she'd shown up at the restaurant. That's when he'd given her a rose and admitted that this date with his dream girl was for her. Kaylee had felt as if she was walking on clouds. The next 6 months had been the most wonderful of her life. Then he'd proposed. Then they'd begun planning their Christmas wedding. Her smile slipped. Then Ethan had called things off. Just like that. No explanation, no closure. The next instant, Ethan was gone from her life, like an expensive hair dye that washed out after a week and left your locks brittle and faded. She watched as Ethan bristled near the window. Something was wrong, she realized. He hurried back toward her and grabbed her hand. A new urgency in his steps.
We need to get out of here.
What? Why?
Someone's out there.
That's just Rudolph again, right?
Rudolph was a reindeer, and that was a buck earlier. But that's not important right now.
He shook his head.
No, someone's out there. Luca's guys, most likely. You don't want to know what they'll do to us if they capture us.
No, she really didn't. Imagining being tortured was bad enough. Living through it? Not fun. A shiver raked through her, and she stood. What are we going to do?
Get your coat on, then follow me.
Kaylee pressed her eyes closed as dread filled her. This whole nightmare wasn't going to end, was it? One thing was for sure. Tim Burton and his scary Christmas movies had nothing on them. How had those guys found them here? It didn't make any sense. Ethan hadn't left a trail. He'd need to figure that out later. Right now, he needed to make sure Kaylee was safe. He pulled her toward the back of the lodge, far away from the shadows moving outside. Ethan! Fear quivered in her voice.
I've got this. Just trust me.
That's a little hard, considering everything I've known about you has been a lie. He locked gazes with her.
Kaylee, the way I felt about you was never a lie.
He meant those words. Breaking up with Kaylee had been one of the hardest things he'd ever done. A day hadn't gone by that he hadn't thought about her. She licked her lips but said nothing. He leaned toward the back door and peered outside. He didn't see any of the shadows back here yet, but it was just a matter of time.
Come on, we've got to be quick and quiet.
Quick and quiet were not two things Kaylee was known for being, but they were going to have to make this work. Ethan opened the back door and glanced around once more. A serene mountainside filled with Christmas trees stared back at him. At once, he darted from the lodge with Kaylee. He ran and didn't stop running until he reached one of the many rows of Christmas trees around them. Only then did he slow, and that was so he could listen for anyone who might be hiding out nearby. After moving more deeply into the tree lot, he ducked behind a spruce. He kept a hold of Kaylee's hand, knowing he needed to keep her close. Then he braced himself for danger. Chapter 15. Kaylee could hardly breathe, and she had to go to the bathroom. Again! Why did she always have to go to the bathroom when she was nervous? It was so annoying and inconvenient, especially in times like this. Not that she'd ever been in a time like this before, but still, she didn't dare move. She knew if she did, she'd accidentally kick a rock or rustle some tree branches. That was just her luck. The stakes were too high right now. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. So instead, she waited. Quiet surrounded them, except for the occasional rustle of branches with the wind. Snow covered the ground, and she knew these guys might be able to follow their footprints. But here, between the trees, parts of the snow had melted, and darkness concealed the ground. Kaylee prayed those elements would work in their favor. More snow continued to fall now, coming from the sky in big flakes that clung to her eyelashes and cheeks. Normally, she'd delight in a moment like this. But not now. Not with so much on the line. Ethan peered around the tree. "Do you see anything?" she whispered.
Not yet, at least not near us. Some shadows are moving in the lodge, so they probably think we hid out inside.
"How many guys are there?" Kaylee knew every question was dangerous, and she feared she might be heard, but she hated feeling clueless also.
I saw 4.
If these guys were as intense as Ethan said, they'd scour these woods until they found her and Ethan. That meant the two of them wouldn't be able to remain here. It would be too risky. Certainly, Ethan knew that too. After all, he was the trained CIA agent. As the thought entered her mind, a stick snapped in the distance. Kaylee stiffened. One of those men were out here, weren't they? Getting close. They were searching between these Christmas trees for them. Was this how she was going to die? Ethan heard the branch snap, felt Kaylee stiffen beside him. He knew danger was closer than ever. All his instincts went on alert. He turned toward Kaylee and placed a finger over his lips. One sound could give them away. They couldn't risk that. Plus, he needed to figure out which direction these guys were approaching from. As he waited, another footfall sounded. It came from the west, just one set. For now. Once the guys realized he and Kaylee weren't in the lodge, they'd all probably be out here searching for them. They wouldn't give up. He took Kaylee's hand and led her around the spruce. He needed to use these trees as cover and put more distance between them and these guys. These trees could be their greatest asset right now. They were large and thick enough to hide behind and stay out of sight. Ethan pulled her behind another tree, then another, then another. Once there, he paused again. Listened. This time, he heard voices.
"They've got to be around here somewhere,"
One of the men said.
"Spread out. We're not leaving until we find them."
Ethan knew he needed to think of another plan. These guys would stay out here all night searching this Christmas tree farm. Staying on the premises and dodging them wasn't going to work. He needed another plan, now. Chapter 16. Kaylee's heart pounded so loudly that she could hardly hear anything else. How was that possible? but she couldn't seem to get her pulse to slow down. She'd heard the voices, more than one, saw flashlight beams skimming the area around them. Certainly, Ethan didn't simply plan on playing hide-and-seek out here all night, did he? As if he could read her thoughts, he pulled her close. His lips brushed her ears as he whispered.
Does this place have some type of garage or maintenance shed?
She nodded as a shiver raced through her. Stupid shiver. There's a barn in the back, on the other side of the lodge. Her voice cracked as she said the words. Couldn't Ethan scoot back just a little? He didn't.
Did the previous owners leave everything when they sold this place?
More warm breath hit her ear. Kaylee had to remain composed. To the best of my knowledge, yes. Why?
Because it's snowing, and my motorcycle won't be safe to ride. Besides, they probably slashed the tires. We need another way out.
What exactly do you think is in there?
I'm hoping an ATV or a snowmobile.
Not to be pessimistic, but even if there is one, who's to say it has gas or a key?
Everything's a risk.
Ethan's gaze caught her as he said the words.
Everything.
Was he trying to get some other message across? Because Kaylee had been the one willing to take the risk, and Ethan hadn't. She hadn't broken up with him, hadn't walked away. That's what he'd done, giving her some flimsy excuse about how he had to concentrate on his job. Well, she supposed in that regard he was telling the truth. He was trying to save the world, after all. Or, at the very least, a whole lot of people. But still, who wanted to take second place to someone's job? Ethan cleared his throat.
You said it's on the other side of the lodge?
Yes. It's probably about 30 yards away, if I remember correctly. It's concealed by a cluster of Douglas firs. I wasn't really paying attention.
We need to get there.
She nodded, knowing she didn't have any better ideas. She hoped Ethan really was a CIA operative, because they were going to need some real expertise to get out of this situation. Ethan knew this move was risky, but it was the only plan he could come up with. The trick would be safely getting from these trees into the barn. From what he could tell, the guys had already searched the lodge and probably the barn also. Now they'd scattered around the Christmas tree farm. Based on what Ethan had read in an old brochure he'd found inside, there were more than 100 acres of various Christmas trees here. That should keep the bad guys busy for a while. Plus, they shouldn't be expecting him and Kaylee to backtrack and go to the barn. At least, that was what Ethan was banking on. Carefully, they ran, ducking behind various Christmas trees as needed. They reached the barn, slipped inside, and slid the doors shut.
Stay by the door and let me know if you see anybody coming.
Ethan told Kaylee once they were inside. She nodded and remained by the door, peering out the crack there. Meanwhile, he shoved his phone under his chin, flashlight on, and began to fiddle with an old, dusty ATV left there. Ethan hoped he could get it started. If it had been sitting too long, the gas in it could have gone bad. Or something in the engine could have seized up. The battery could be dead. Having a key would be a bonus. But this wasn't helping anything, was it? Instead, he focused on the machine. His whole escape plan hinged on it. He checked the engine and the battery. If his theory was correct, he just needed to tighten a few things and… "They're coming," Kaylee whispered.
Already?
Ethan muttered.
I just need a couple more minutes.
Everything looked to be in working order. He tugged on wires and jammed them together, trying to hotwire the vehicle. Kaylee stared out the crack of the door. "I don't know what to tell you, but they're still coming." Ethan muttered a few exclamations under his breath. A few minutes later, the engine coughed and choked and then came to life. He let out a murmur of victory.
Come on, hop on behind me.
Kaylee's eyebrows shot up and her face lit. "Do you want me to drive?" The offer caught him off guard for a second, and he shook his head. Probably a little too quickly.
Absolutely not. Let's go. We need to get out of here.
Kaylee jumped on behind him. "I mean, I could drive while you shoot at them or something." If Ethan didn't know better, he'd think Kaylee was enjoying this. He'd have to think about that later. Right now, he had to figure a way out of here. Too bad they couldn't leave this barn the typical way. Ethan was going to have to get creative. Chapter 17. Kaylee wrapped her arms tighter around Ethan's waist and closed her eyes. This had bad idea written all over it, and she couldn't watch. She'd been serious about driving. If she was concentrating on not dying, it would help keep her mind off of, well, dying. Besides, she may be clumsy, but she could maneuver a vehicle with the best of them. For now, she'd just have to trust Ethan on this. A moment later, as she heard the men burst through the barn doors, she realized she couldn't not watch, and she peeled open her eyes in time to see Ethan zoom toward the other side of the barn. Toward the wall. The intact wall. Dear Lord. She pressed her eyes closed again. Harder this time. Shouts sounded behind them. Bullets flew. Then she heard a loud crash. Sensed things flying around her. Felt a burst of cold air. Had Ethan just burst through the barn wall? She plucked one eye open and saw they were outside, and relatively unscathed at that. She glanced back at the broken boards on this side of the barn and the small opening that had just been forged. They could fix the damage to the barn later. Ethan sped toward the woods in the distance. Her enthusiasm switched to trepidation. Kaylee wasn't sure what waited for them there. There could be cliffs and sudden drop-offs and rivers. Plus, it was dark. They wouldn't even be able to see except for 6 feet in front of them. Ethan headed toward the trees. Would the four-wheeler even fit through the thick woods? Somehow they did. Kaylee stole a glance behind them and saw the men chasing them, but there was no chance they would catch them on foot. The ATV was faster. With every rock and root they hit, Kaylee's backside ached more, thanks to her earlier slide down the mountain, but she supposed there were worse things. Ethan continued forward until finally they hit some type of trail, probably a service road farm workers used. How did he know this was here? Kaylee didn't know. She didn't really care at the moment. All she cared about was the path in front of them that could lead them to safety. They continued zipping along the mountainside. Darkness surrounded them, other than a small path lit by their headlights a short distance in front of them. Snowflakes hit their faces until Kaylee could hardly feel her cheeks and nose. Eventually, she didn't hear the men shouting, didn't feel any bullets flying. This didn't seem real. This couldn't be her life right now. But it was. She had no idea how this was going to end up, what she and Ethan's next step would be. But for now, she closed her eyes and hoped she didn't regret trusting Ethan. Ethan had thought he'd seen a path cutting through the woods earlier. He'd taken a chance that he could find it on the ATV. Thankfully, he had. Otherwise, the mountains would be way too treacherous just to ride through in the dark. 30 minutes or so after they had left, he saw a light in the distance. He slowed the ATV until finally pulling to the side of the trail. Then he parked and climbed off. By the time he turned to offer Kaylee a hand, she was already up and running behind a tree. In some ways, men did have things much easier, didn't they? Ethan gave her the privacy she needed and studied the cabin standing in the distance with several vehicles parked outside. "What are you doing?" Kaylee whispered a few minutes later as she moved in beside him. "What if those guys find us here? Maybe they're already here, just waiting for us to show up."
They couldn't have gotten here this quickly, and this ATV shouldn't be on any state roads. Besides, there's not enough gas to make it much farther.
"So, you're going to ask these people for some gas or something?" His jaw twitched.
Not quite. You stay here. If things turn ugly, run into the woods and hide.
"If things turn ugly?" Kaylee's voice pitched with anxiety. "What does that even mean?"
Just stay here.
Ethan started toward the cabin. Lights lit 2 of the windows, and he heard voices inside. But this wasn't the time for conventional politeness. He went to the first vehicle, a truck, and tugged the door. It was locked. The car beside it was also locked, as was the Jeep parked next to it. He stopped by the last vehicle. It was an old sedan that had been tricked out and decorated for Christmas. Across the hood, the words "Santa Sleighs" had been painted in red. Something that looked similar to a sleigh had been attached to the back of the vehicle, and gigantic jingle bells hung from the rearview mirror. Not ideal, but he hesitated only a moment before tugging at the door. It was unlocked. Of course! Letting out a breath, Ethan climbed inside. This wasn't exactly the most inconspicuous vehicle, not by any means. But when he reached above the visor, he found the keys. It appeared this was their answer to prayer. It also appeared God had a sense of humor. Ethan twisted the key in the ignition. It started! Loud psychedelic Christmas music began blaring from massive speakers in the back. White Christmas, to be exact. He quickly flipped the radio off. But it was too late. Another light came on inside the house. Wasting no more time, Ethan threw the car into drive and squealed away. He had to get Kaylee and get out of here. Just as he swerved onto the main driveway, a man stepped outside with his fists in the air.
What do you think you're doing?
Sorry.
Ethan waved a hand and pressed the accelerator harder. He'd make it up to this guy somehow. But right now, the stakes were too high to stop and explain. As the guy began chasing behind him, Ethan pulled to a stop beside Kaylee and opened the passenger door.
Get in!
He rushed. Kaylee gaped at him. "You stole this, didn't you?"
Hey!
The man shouted as he ran toward them. He was closing the distance quickly, and somewhere along the way, he'd picked up a bat.
We don't have time for this now. Just get in.
Ethan said the words more forcefully this time. Kaylee glanced back at the man running toward them. Then she dove inside. When she did, Ethan pulled away, knowing they needed to get to safety so they could calculate their next plan of action. Chapter 18. Kaylee stared at Ethan in disbelief. "You just stole his car."
I've done worse things.
He stared at the road ahead, a focused look in his gaze. "How can you even be so glib? I hope you know I'm not going down with you for this." Kaylee narrowed her eyes at him. "I thought you were a good, upstanding citizen, not a lawbreaker. But now it makes sense why you wanted to avoid your clients when you saw them out in public. They weren't clients, were they?"
I might have on occasion dodged an anxiety-triggering relative,
He shrugged.
but most of the people I avoided were enemies of some sort.
"Go figure." She crossed her arms.
I promise, I'll make it up to the guy who owns this car. I'll return the vehicle to him as good as new with a full tank of gas, and I'll take care of any damages.
Kaylee gripped the armrest as Ethan took a turn a little too fast. "Damages? Does that mean you're anticipating more bullets flying toward us?" He twisted his head, not denying it.
In my line of work, you never know.
She turned away from him. That wasn't comforting. Nor was the fact that he was driving this old sedan that had been tricked out for Christmas. Flashing red and green lights glowed beneath the sedan, and she'd heard the loud Christmas music when Ethan had started the car. Plus, there were the plastic sides that curled up on the ends that made it look like a sleigh. A Santa bobblehead wearing a hula skirt danced on the dash, and those annoying jingle bells kept jangling on the rearview mirror. She could hardly think over the sound of them, so she finally jerked them down and threw them in the back seat. "Where are we?" She turned to Ethan as he sped away from the scene. "And where are we going to go?" His jaw visibly hardened.
I need to get that diamond.
"So, we're going to my mom's house?"
We need to go sometime when she's not there.
"That won't be a problem." Kaylee swallowed hard as soon as the words left her lips. She hadn't meant to say that aloud. He stole a glance at her.
What do you mean?
She left the country after Ava's party. A rock settled in her chest as she said the words. "She and Richard are going to Paris." Ethan blinked as if he hadn't heard her correctly.
Paris? So close to Christmas?
Kaylee pushed away the well of emotions that rose inside her. Emotions she'd desperately been trying to avoid. That's where they wanted to spend Christmas.
Without you?
His voice rose in indignation. He had no right to offer that reaction after what he'd done, but she didn't want to go around and around about that. Instead, she shrugged. "What can I say? They're lovebirds, and they want to spend some alone time together."
So, who are you going to spend Christmas with?
"Do not cry," Kaylee told herself. "This is not the time or the place." Besides, she'd already wasted too many tears on her failed Christmas plans. On everything, really. She swallowed hard, determined to sound stronger than she felt. "By myself, it's no big deal. I don't have to celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day, right?" Ethan stole another glance at her as they rode down the road. She knew what he was thinking. She saw it in his gaze. He felt sorry for her. Little Kaylee, the girl everyone had abandoned, including him.
I'm sorry.
His words came out softly.
I know this isn't what you had planned for this Christmas.
It was true. She and Ethan were supposed to be married in 2 days. Then they were supposed to go on their honeymoon to Key West. Afterward, they'd return to Virginia just in time to celebrate Christmas. Kaylee had it all planned out, but she knew what they said about the best laid plans. She'd lived it. I don't want to talk about this anymore. She crossed her arms again. Ethan nodded as they headed farther down the road.
Understood.
If only Kaylee could leave those thoughts behind just as easily as they dashed away from the barn. Ethan couldn't believe what Kaylee had told him. After everything Kaylee had been through, her mom decided not to spend Christmas with her. Guilt pounded at him. He wished he could go back and change things, that he could make them right. But that wasn't possible. Still, Kaylee deserved the very best. She deserved for something to go right in her life. Ethan glanced at her now as she stared out the window, a hollow look in her gaze. What he wouldn't do to be able to reach over and squeeze her hand. But he knew his touch wouldn't be welcome, so he didn't even attempt it. Instead, he pulled off the smaller mountain road and surveyed the state road in front of him. No one was coming from either direction. Certainly, those guys were searching every road possible by now. But maybe Ethan had bought him and Kaylee a little bit of time, at least.
How do I get to your mom's house?
Kaylee gave him directions, and he headed away from the area where the lodge was located. Would Luca's guys figure it out and head to George's new house also? Ethan couldn't be sure. He didn't know what they were thinking or how much they knew. But right now, Ethan was certain of one thing. He wished he'd never gotten Kaylee involved in this. Chapter 19. Kaylee cleared her throat as they headed down the road. How did you know to find me at the party?
What?
Ethan stole a glance at her. How did you know where to find me? Normal people would have found me at home or at work, not at a party. I didn't exactly put it out on my socials that I'd be there. His jaw tightened again. She knew that look. There was something he didn't want to say. Ethan! She locked her gaze on his. He let out a breath.
The truth is, I put trackers in your earrings.
You what? Kaylee reached for the diamond studs.
It was only as a safety measure, not because I wanted to be intrusive.
That seems awfully intrusive. She wanted to give him a good, solid punch in the shoulder, but it would probably hurt her more than it would him.
I can see that, and I'm sorry. But when I saw Luca's men in this area, I knew he must have found out where the formula was.
How would he have done that?
I'm not sure. I had to use the tracker to find you. I knew I didn't have any time to waste.
That makes sense, I guess. They turned the corner, and a few moments later, Kaylee stared at her mom's house in the distance. The stately, 5,000-square-foot brick home rose amongst 8 acres of manicured lawn. It was quite the change from the small apartment she'd grown up in, an apartment on the wrong side of town at that. Her mom had stayed there until 4 months ago, when she'd married. Talking about moving up in the world, the place in front of her looked empty. The lights were off, and there weren't any signs of life. She and Ethan had headed on foot down a small road their neighbors used for hunting. They'd left the car at the back of the property, surrounded by woods. Kaylee let out a long breath as she turned toward Ethan. So what's the plan? He stared at the house with razor-sharp focus.
I need to make sure that these guys aren't monitoring the place. Do you have access to any security cameras?
I do. Let me pull up the feed on the app. She grabbed her phone. You don't think these guys are tracking this app or anything, do you? Ethan glanced at her and raised an eyebrow.
You watch too many spy movies.
I feel like I'm in a spy movie. Kaylee shrugged, not bothering to argue with him. Instead, she opened the app on her phone and pulled up the recent notifications. The system stored a video every time movement was recorded. The device kept those videos for up to 48 hours. As the most recent movement in front of the house started to play, she leaned closer to Ethan. Their shoulders brushed, but she didn't complain. She'd missed their moments of closeness, of snuggling as they watched TV or holding each other while they gazed at the stars. As an ache filled her heart, Kaylee quickly averted her thoughts. She couldn't think like that. The two of them were over. Her gaze went back to the screen, and her throat tightened when she noticed her mom and Richard leaving the house with their luggage. They'd departed 3 hours ago. Kaylee had been abducted, and they were still carrying on with life as if nothing had happened. A pang of sadness flashed through her. Was her mother really so wrapped up in her new life that she wouldn't even stop to show she cared about Kaylee? The thought hurt. She couldn't deny it.
I'm sorry, Kaylee.
The compassion in Ethan's voice was enough to break her, which she could not allow to happen. She brushed Ethan off and pulled herself back together. It's fine. I'm fine. Everything's fine. She realized how insincere her words sounded and decided to stop talking, at least talking about that.
If it helps, I may have mentioned to her that the whole Santa abduction thing was a stunt.
Ethan muttered. What? Her voice climbed. He shrugged.
I couldn't have a bunch of people looking into this.
Kaylee repressed an aggravated sigh. Even if that's true, shouldn't she have wanted to confirm? To tell me goodbye before she left for her trip? Ethan said nothing. Instead, she turned her attention back to the security cameras. I haven't seen any other signs of movement since they left. Kaylee checked the rest of the security cameras just to be certain. But that's how it appeared. Ethan leaned closer so he could see better. As his shoulder brushed hers, an unwelcome shiver raced through her. Dog. Gone. Shivers. Why did her body have to do that? Why did she have to feel so much toward him? It was almost as if she wanted to set herself up for more heartbreak. Why would anyone want to do that to themselves? Another ache filled her chest. Ethan didn't seem to notice her reaction as he glanced back at the house.
I still want to wait a few more minutes, just in case.
Don't you have a team you can call in to help you, so you won't be so outnumbered? She studied Ethan's face, desperate to divert her thoughts. There were so many other things she could think about, things other than her broken heart. So much about this entire situation didn't make sense. A barely perceptible frown tugged at his lips.
It's complicated.
Make it uncomplicated. He let out a breath and rubbed his jaw, which looked tight, as it always did when he was stressed.
The truth is, I'm really not sure who I can trust.
He pressed his lips together and rubbed his jaw again, betrayal staining his gaze.
I'm afraid someone on my team sold me out.
Her eyes widened. That was not what she'd expected to hear. Why would you think that? Ethan shrugged.
How else would they have known that this formula was implanted in your engagement ring? The only people who knew about that was me and the 3 members of my team. There's no way that Luca or his guys should have known.
The sinking feeling in her stomach sank even lower. A few minutes of silence passed until Ethan opened his car door.
Okay, let's go. But I'm going to need you to stay close to me, just in case.
Of course. As they climbed from the decked-out race car, Ethan took her hand. Together, they darted across the lawn. They didn't stop running until they reached the back door. At the back of the house, Ethan glanced around as Kaylee punched in the key code on the lock. A moment later, she opened the door, and Ethan ushered her inside, carefully locking up behind them. They needed to be careful, very careful right now. These guys had eyes and ears everywhere. They had people in their pockets that, well, Ethan had only begun to dive into that. He'd discovered that when money was involved, men's hearts could be changed entirely too easily. Most men could be bought. He never wanted to be one of them. But wasn't that what he already was? He'd traded the best relationship of his life for his job? Or had he? If he'd stayed with Kaylee, she would have been in even more danger. He was trying to save the world, that much was true. But he'd also been trying to protect the woman he loved. Yet, despite all his efforts, she was still in danger. The irony wasn't lost on him. However, he also feared that one of his colleagues may have given in to that love of money. Only 3 other people knew what he'd done. Was one of them a mole? He paused and observed the dark house in front of him.
This place is a nice change from the old apartment.
I suppose. Kaylee stopped beside him and frowned. It doesn't quite feel like home.
Do you live here?
Ethan had seen her come and go from this place a few times, but he didn't know if she was staying here permanently or just for the holidays. She nodded, seeming surprisingly somber. My roommate, as you probably remember, got married. She wanted the apartment, so I'm looking for somewhere new. But in the meantime, Mom said I could stay here. I don't think Richard's very happy about it, but my mom didn't give him that choice. After all, his grandkids have rooms here. Why not me? Ethan heard the pain in her voice. He wanted to know more, but not right now. Long conversations were too risky. Instead, Ethan placed a hand on Kaylee's back.
Show me where the ornament is.
She led him through the kitchen, down a small hallway, then finally into a massive living room. A 14-foot-high Christmas tree rose in the corner. But it wasn't decorated the way Kaylee liked, not based on what Ethan remembered from what she'd told him last Christmas. Kaylee liked homemade ornaments full of memories to reminisce about. This tree was pretty, too pretty. Everything was balanced, color-coordinated, and professional. Something you'd see in a corporate office. It almost didn't seem like the kind of tree where an ornament like Kaylee had described would be. An ornament with a diamond ring on it. Ethan shook his head. He still couldn't get over that. Yet, at the same time, it seemed fitting for Kaylee. She took lemons and made them into lemonade. He could admire that. It's right over here, she muttered. Ethan followed her toward the tree, staying close, and still listening for any telltale signs. He wanted to believe that the security cameras had been correct, but he'd seen and experienced too much to let down his guard. Kaylee went to the tree and reached around the back of it. If this ornament had been designed with as much love as Kaylee made it seem, Ethan was surprised it wasn't displayed front and center on the tree. The bad feeling in his gut grew stronger. Kaylee deserved to be around people who appreciated her. An ache pulsed in his chest. Why did he wish for things he could never have? He couldn't do that. There was too much at stake, his own personal happiness. Well, he seemed to have signed a waiver on that when he joined the CIA. But was that the biggest mistake he could have made? Possibly. Could he fix it? Also a possibility. But he couldn't figure that out now. However, some other agencies had offered him a job, including a security agency called Blackout that was based in North Carolina. He was going to reconsider calling them back. Kaylee let out a small gasp, and a knot formed between her eyes.
What is it?
Ethan moved closer. She continued to move various branches on the tree, her motions becoming more frantic.
Kaylee!
A bad feeling brewed in his gut, but he hoped he was wrong. Finally, she turned toward him. Ethan, I don't know what to say, but it's gone. The ornament is gone. Chapter 20. Kaylee felt certain that she was missing something. Ethan obviously felt that way too, because he pulled up the flashlight on his phone and began to shine it in the Christmas tree.
Look again. If one of Luca's men grabbed it already, they wouldn't be after us now.
I've already looked, she said. It's not here.
Let me see. Maybe it fell.
He joined her and searched the branches top to bottom, but he clearly didn't see an ornament that fit its description either. He and Kaylee crouched on the floor and began looking beneath the tree. There was nothing there. They checked the branches again. In the end, the truth was clear. The ornament was gone. She glanced at Ethan, feeling an unwarranted amount of guilt. She had nothing to feel bad about. She knew that. This was all Ethan's doing. But that didn't stop remorse from flooding her. I don't know what to say. She stood, brushing off some stray fir needles, and shrugged. Images of people suddenly becoming ill at the hands of terrorists who unleashed this mistletoe serum filled her mind. This wasn't just about a ring. This was about the well-being of innocent citizens. His gaze sharpened.
Kaylee, where could it be? I need you to think.
I am thinking! Her voice rose with frustration. Why didn't he believe her? He was the one who'd lied to her. Ethan frowned, as if he'd realized how demanding he'd sounded.
I'm sorry, Kaylee.
He softened his voice.
It's just, this is important. I didn't mean to sound accusing.
Her guard went up even higher as a new thought filled her mind. What if Ethan was just pretending to be sweet to get what he wanted? After all, he'd lied to her once. What if he was lying again? And here she was, feeling all these tingly, baby, it's cold outside feelings toward him. She didn't care if some people considered that the blurred lines of Christmas songs. She'd always thought the lyrics were swoony. Was she an idiot? Clearly she was. A lonely idiot destined to spend Christmas alone. Kaylee drew in a breath and tried to pull herself together. The only thing I can think of is that maybe my mom took it with her.
Can you call her?
She's on her way to Paris. She should be on the plane by now. As she said the words, she heard a click in the distance. Then a man stepped around the corner with a gun in his hand and said,
Took what with her?
Ethan sucked in a breath. Luka Novak. Had he given up on sending his henchmen and come to do the job himself? But how had he found them? Again, Ethan had been careful. He'd covered his tracks. There was no way Luka should have found them here. Ethan moved in front of Kaylee.
How did you find us?
Luka smirked and stepped closer.
It's not important.
It's important to me.
What you feel right now is not important. The only thing that's important is that I get that formula back.
The cocky 50-something man stepped into the light and his craggy face stared at them. Kaylee gasped. Your accent. You're the man who was at the estate. Luka ignored her, and his gaze locked onto Ethan's instead.
Where is it?
Ethan had to make a quick choice. If he told Luka he didn't have it, the man would keep him alive. After all, if Ethan was dead, Luka would never get his hands on the formula. But then the man also might force Ethan to find it, and he could use Kaylee as leverage. No, the best thing to do right now was to run. Kaylee gripped his arm as she stood behind him, her breathing entirely too rapid and shallow for his comfort. Luka glared as he stepped forward.
I need that formula. You should have never stolen it.
You should have never hired someone to create it in the first place.
Ethan shot back. Luka scowled.
Don't go sounding like you have the moral high ground here. If you'd just give it back to me, this will all be over.
Ethan knew that wasn't the case. Luka had plans for the serum, nefarious plans, no doubt.
Well,
Luka stepped closer. Kaylee squeezed Ethan's arm tighter. Ethan had a gun. He could use it, but he had a better idea. As Luka took another step, Ethan lunged for the tree. He caught the side of it, and the monstrosity crashed down, taking Luka down with it. Ethan took Kaylee's hand, knowing they only had a small window to escape. But as soon as they stepped beyond Luka, men covered from head to toe in black burst through the doors and windows. Wood splintered, glass shattered. Luka's henchmen invaded the space from every angle. Ethan's jaw tightened as he braced himself for action. It appeared that their troubles were just heating up. Chapter 21. Kaylee felt a shot of fear rush down her spine. However, she'd thought through this scenario one too many times. It was a strange habit, but when she tried to go to sleep at night, she often found herself contemplating what she would do in the face of disaster. Like if she went off a bridge while driving over it, or if a tunnel suddenly collapsed while she was inside, or if she were stuck at the top of a Ferris wheel or roller coaster. If it's to be, it's up to me. That's when a plan hit her. I have an idea. Ethan narrowed his eyes.
A good one?
Yes, of course. Kaylee grabbed Ethan's hand and pulled him toward the stairway. As bullets flew behind them, they ducked.
Don't you know you're never supposed to go upstairs in these situations?
Ethan asked. Just trust me. Kaylee threw his words back at him. Ethan raised his eyebrows but kept moving. She hoped that this plan worked. She thought it would. The men yelled and scrambled behind them. She and Ethan didn't have much time. Moving as fast as she could, she ducked into the room belonging to Carson, Richard's 10-year-old grandson. Ethan locked the door behind them. As he did, Kaylee heard more bullets flying.
You brought me to a little kid's room?
Ethan looked around, an incredulous look on his face. Yes, but it was for a good reason. Follow me. Kaylee opened some French doors, displaying a small balcony waiting there. Right above it was the zip line Carson had begged his grandfather to install a few weeks ago. Carson and Kaylee had tested it out a few times last weekend. It had been more fun than she'd thought, and she and Carson had ended up giggling like two little kids. Well, Carson was a little kid, but she wasn't. Still, the childlike feelings had been a welcome change from her heartache. Kaylee tugged on the trolley handle on the zip line. I can't remember the weight limit, but this is our only way out. Ethan twisted his head as if contemplating his options. As a bullet splintered the wooden door, he must have realized time was running out. Ethan had to admit he had his doubts, but Kaylee really had come through. This was a great idea. There was no time to put on a safety harness, no time to attach a backup line. Instead, he gripped the handles. With Kaylee clutching the handles in front of him, he moved closer to the edge.
On 3.
The seconds passed as they counted down. Just as the door splintered open behind them, Ethan propelled them from the balcony. He hoped and prayed this contraption could handle their combined weight. Right now, it was a chance they'd have to take. They glided through the air.
This is awfully Home Alone of you to think of this.
He muttered, as snow and wind hit his face. That's what I thought too. A touch of delight filled her voice. It's nostalgic, right? Yes, it was. Last Christmas vacation, the two of them had watched that movie together while eating popcorn and drinking hot chocolate in front of a blazing fireplace. He'd felt like he'd been living inside a Hallmark movie, and it had been wonderful. But as much as Ethan might want to enjoy this moment, he knew he couldn't. More bullets flew behind them. This zipline probably stretched 60 feet, all the way to the 4-car garage behind the property. If Ethan had to guess, all of Luca's men were inside the house still. This would give them a nice head start. As they got closer to the garage, Ethan squeezed the handbrakes to slow them down. Reaching the platform, they released the zipline trolley and landed. A rush of exhilaration flashed through him. But again, he didn't have time to enjoy it. Instead, he took Kaylee's hand.
Let's go.
Then they ran back to Santa Sleigh's. Chapter 22. Kaylee's heart still raced. She couldn't believe she and Ethan just escaped like that. Even more so, she couldn't believe they'd done it successfully. But it was too early to declare victory. Even though Ethan was speeding them away from the estate, Kaylee knew these guys could still catch up. However, 10 minutes into their escape, she still hadn't spotted anyone behind them. Had they truly lost these guys? Did she dare relax a moment at that thought? No, she couldn't. Not yet. Instead, she glanced at Ethan. He looked so handsome, but intense, as he gripped the wheel. There was a time when she'd thought she could stare at his profile all day. She shifted her thoughts. Where are we going now? His jaw twitched as he peered at the road ahead.
I need to recalculate, but I don't want to stop anywhere yet. I need to know we're safe first.
At the moment, Kaylee couldn't imagine anywhere she might feel safe. She hoped Ethan thought of something. She reflected on what he'd told her earlier, about how he didn't know who he could trust. That was a hard reality to contend with. But the last thing Kaylee wanted right now was to feel sorry for the man who'd lied to her and broken her heart. Especially since she wasn't sure if she could truly rely on him. She wanted to believe she could. Then again, she'd wanted to believe a lot of things. When she was younger, she'd wanted to believe Santa was real, that her dad would return, that true love wasn't just for fairy tales. Most of those things had only let her down in the end. Ethan could deal with his own letdowns. Did that sound harsh? There she went again. Couldn't she just turn off her compassionate side for once? It would make things a lot easier. 30 minutes later, Ethan pulled into a used car dealership near the downtown Charlottesville area. He backed in at the end of one of the rows, as if the car belonged there. Then he quickly stepped out and pulled the plastic sleigh cutouts from the back of the vehicle. Since the hood wasn't facing the street, the words painted across it shouldn't draw any attention. In fact, the car almost, blended with the other pre-owned vehicles here. Kaylee watched as Ethan went through the lot, tugging on door handles. Then he motioned her over. Moving quickly, she climbed from the car and dashed toward him. He'd opened the door of an SUV with tinted windows, and they climbed in the back seat.
Crouch low.
He told her as he locked the door.
Better safe than sorry.
Smart thinking. He turned toward her.
We can hide here for a while, but we can't get too comfortable.
Too comfortable in this cold SUV? That wouldn't be happening. That was for sure. Several moments of silence passed, almost as if Ethan were giving her time to comprehend this situation. Darkness surrounded them. The time on Kaylee's watch told her it was 3:30 a.m. What a night! In a few hours, the sun would start rising. But for now, she stared at the Christmas lights that had been strung around the perimeter of the car dealership. They somehow made the sketchy place seem more friendly. She tugged her coat more tightly around herself as the chill from outside began to creep into the car. She was going to have to deal with it, even though some heat sounded really nice right now. Ethan turned toward her.
Do you have any idea where that ornament might be?
Her mind turned back to the seriousness of the situation, and she shrugged. I wish I could offer something, but I really don't know. I mean, I put it on the tree, and I was marveling that my ring was a part of it, and no one even knew.
You didn't tell your mom or Ava?
Kaylee shook her head. I didn't. It was my little secret. I was going to figure out what to do with the ornament next. Besides, isn't the real issue here the fact that you put the formula in my ring? Ethan rubbed a hand over his face.
I know how much you like jewelry. I knew that even if I had to break things off with you, that you would still keep that ring close. It's just the way you operate.
Oh, and you think you know so much about the way I operate? A touch of attitude filled her voice as she crossed her arms. He raised an eyebrow.
Don't I?
You lost that right. He twisted his head.
Touché.
She thought being right would feel better, but it didn't. Instead, she let out a sigh. Then a new thought hit her, and she sat up straight. What if Richard is involved with this? I mean, I hate to throw my stepdad under the bus, but… Ethan narrowed his eyes.
Why would you think that?
He and my mom met shortly after we got engaged. They had a very fast courtship, engagement, and wedding. But Richard rubs elbows with all types of important people. Plus, there's always been something about him I don't like. I figured it was because I was secretly resentful that he was pulling my mom's attention away from me. But maybe there's more to it than that.
You might be onto something. Let me do a quick background check on him.
Kaylee held her breath as she waited to see what he might discover. Chapter 23. Ethan typed Richard Lewis's name into a program on his phone that would tell him if the man had a criminal record or any known criminal associates. It took several minutes to get the results, but nothing showed.
I don't think he's involved.
He glanced at Kaylee and watched her reaction. She frowned and sank deeper in the seat. I guess I shouldn't be disappointed. I mean, my mom's happy and stuff. That counts for something. She deserves to be happy after all those years as a single mom.
Changes can be hard.
He murmured. Especially for Kaylee. She always seemed to rally against them. Maybe, for right now, he should distract her.
So, what was number 12 on your list?
Ethan turned toward her, truly curious to find out more information. Her eyebrows shot up. What do you mean?
Ava mentioned something about it at the party. Some kind of list you'd created.
Kaylee's cheeks reddened just slightly. He could see it even in the dark. She let out a sigh as if she'd been cornered. If you must know, I made a list of everything I want to do on the days leading to Christmas. It's just something to keep me… She shrugged and looked away, almost as if embarrassed. I don't know. Excited about the holidays, I guess. If it's to be, it's up to me. Ethan remembered the phrase that Kaylee often liked to say. That was Kaylee for you. She tried her best not to let life get her down.
So, what's number 12?
He repeated. Go on a date. She frowned. Ava made me put that on there.
And that guy at the party was your date?
She nodded. It was terrible, to be quite honest.
What number are you on now?
A small frown tugged at her lips. Number 15. It involves driving around town and looking at Christmas lights. That was today's item to be checked off, actually. I guess that won't be happening. Ethan shrugged.
You never know. Maybe this will all be over soon, and life will resume like this never happened.
His words hung in the air. They both knew that wasn't true. These events had changed them. They'd reminded Ethan how much he cared about her. Truly cared. He wanted the best for her. Wanted to see her happy. She deserved that. She deserved someone who could give her the life she'd always wanted. He wished he believed he could be that man. With hitmen on his tail, he wasn't sure that was possible. But as Ethan stared at Kaylee right now, he wanted what they'd had before. Kaylee felt something changing in her heart. No, not changing. The feelings had always been there. She'd never stopped loving Ethan, no matter how she'd tried to convince herself to do so. He was unlike anyone she'd ever met before, and he captured a place in her heart that she wasn't sure she'd ever be able to erase. As she looked at him now, she knew he felt the same way. The look in his eyes was undeniable. Without thinking, she reached up and ran a hand over his face, skimming the outline of his jaw. "I'm sorry, Ethan." Their gazes caught.
I'm the one that should be sorry. It's the choice I made when I took this job. You didn't have a choice in all this.
"Can you look me in the eyes and tell me something?" Her voice turned even more serious.
Anything.
He dropped his head to the side.
Well, anything except state secrets.
That managed to get a smile out of her. But the motion quickly disappeared. She cleared her throat before starting. "When you and I met, was that truly a coincidence, or have I been part of some type of plan all along?" His gaze softened.
Oh, Kaylee, I never intended on meeting you. And I definitely never intended on falling in love.
Falling in love? Kaylee's heart raced. Had he really loved her? She swallowed hard. So that wasn't an act?
No, it wasn't an act at all. In fact, meeting you nearly derailed me. It made me want to get out of this line of work. But my boss told me just one more mission. And that mission was Operation Mistletoe.
You were going to change careers for me?
Absolutely. You were worth it. You still are worth it. It's just that things went upside down. They were out of my control. I couldn't bear the thought of something happening to you.
Her heart pounded harder. Their gazes locked. And as he leaned toward her, she didn't try to stop the kiss that was about to take place. Instead, she leaned toward him too. Not only was she not going to stop it, she wanted it to happen. Ethan wasn't sure what he was doing. He only knew that Kaylee was the single most important person in his life. And when she looked at him like that, he felt himself turning to butter. That wasn't something he normally admitted, even to himself. He prided himself on being as tough as nails, objective, and unemotional. But not right now, not when it came to Kaylee. He stared at her lips. Ethan had lost so much when he'd ended things with her. Now he felt as if he'd been given a second chance. Wasting no more time, he cupped her jaw with his hand. The next instant, he leaned closer, and their lips met. She didn't resist. Nor did Kaylee resist when the kiss deepened, when he tugged her against him. Everything else disappeared from around them. He ran his hands through her hair, over her shoulders, back up to her neck. Everything about Kaylee was wonderful. The faint peppermint smell that somehow still wafted from her, despite their adventures today. The softness of her hair, the ampleness of her lips. He'd missed her so much. She made him a better person. He'd always known that. Kaylee pulled back, but still remained close enough that their foreheads touched. Ethan tried to catch his breath, to slow his heartbeat, yet another part of him didn't want to. Kaylee reached for him again as she nestled her head in the crook of his neck. She leaned into him, curling next to him.
I've missed you so much.
He whispered. "I've missed you too." As quickly as warmth had filled her eyes, Kaylee stiffened as if her walls had gone back up. She pulled away from him and searched his gaze, her eyes distressed. "Ethan, what happens after this?"
What do you mean?
Even though he knew exactly what she meant. She shifted, the frown on her face deepening. Let's say you find this formula. What would you do with it?
Most likely I'll destroy it.
And if you don't find it?
I'll keep looking.
She glanced at her hands in her lap. So either way, these guys will keep chasing you. These guys will keep wanting you dead. That means that the people around you will remain in danger. This isn't going to end, is it? Her statement hung in the air. Ethan knew exactly what she was getting at. However they looked at it, the two of them could never be together. Because it was too risky. And Ethan couldn't put the woman he loved in danger. His heart twisted at the thought. Just then, headlights turned into the parking lot. Those thoughts were forgotten. Kaylee squeezed his arm. Ethan,
It's those guys.
he stiffened.
They're here.
Chapter 24. Kaylee felt her heart pounding in her ears. How had those guys found them? At least this SUV had tinted windows. Still, she didn't want to take any chances. She sank down lower in the seat, but still remained upright enough that she could see what was happening. If these guys were going to kill them, she wanted to see them coming. She still gripped Ethan's arm as he also peered out. His strong, rock-like muscles flexed beneath her fingers. And her heart panged with a moment of sadness. Things had been so beautiful for a moment, until reality had crashed down. But this wasn't the time to think about that. Instead, she watched as the vehicle pulled to a stop near the Santa Sleigh's sedan. Two guys, armed with guns, got out and began to circle it. Her lungs tightened until she could hardly breathe. Thank goodness they hadn't stayed inside that car,
They're not here.
one of the men muttered.
Then where did they go?
That's a good question. They must have stolen another vehicle and gotten out of here.
That was exactly what Ethan had been hoping for, hadn't it? Now that they said it out loud, it made perfect sense. She felt a rush of admiration for Ethan,
We need to keep looking.
one of the guys said.
We don't have any time to waste. Not if we're going to get our Christmas miracle.
Christmas miracle? What was he talking about? She instinctively knew that it wasn't something of the positive type, that it wasn't something that would bring goodwill to others. Most likely, it was the opposite. As the men began to pace back toward their own vehicle, they suddenly paused. One of them glanced at his phone. Then they turned and strode closer to the SUV, where she and Ethan were hiding. And as they did, Ethan reached for his gun. What were these guys doing? Ethan wondered. They shouldn't have any reason to believe that he and Kaylee were inside this vehicle right now. So why were they coming this way? He hoped it didn't boil down to a gunfight. But for now, he needed to wait. One of the guys continued to pace, peering at the various cars as if he was looking for something. Ethan's grip tightened on his gun. He heard Kaylee beside him. Her breathing had grown shallower.
Just stay where you are.
Ethan muttered under his breath.
There's nothing to see here.
Finally, the man paused, turned the other way, and then walked back to his vehicle.
Let's get out of here. We have other means of figuring out where they went.
The guy said. But it wasn't until they pulled away that Ethan released his breath. However, he and Kaylee were not out of trouble yet. First, they had to figure out how these guys were able to keep finding them. Chapter 25. That was close, Kaylee muttered as she slumped against the seat.
Yes, it was.
Kaylee studied Ethan a moment, and she could see he was struggling with something. You're trying to figure out how they found us?
Yes, something's not right.
He rubbed his jaw again. And that's when Kaylee gasped. Please tell me you don't have a tracker hidden in a filling that you're going to need to dig out of your tooth or something? I don't think I could handle that. He cast her a strange look.
I don't.
Embedded under your skin?
I don't have any trackers on me, Kaylee.
His gaze strayed to her earrings.
That has to be it.
She reached for her ears. Are they following me somehow? His face told her all the answers she needed.
It's the only thing that makes sense.
He said. Her heart caught in her throat. Does that mean I need to get rid of them? They were my grandmother's. His eyes wavered back and forth with thought before he finally said,
I know this isn't what you want to hear, but would you mind giving them to me? I'll get them back to you, I promise.
After a moment of hesitation, she nodded and pulled them from her ears, placing them in his hands. She felt like she was losing another piece of her heart along with them. You know how important those are to me, right?
I do, but this tracker takes a while to catch up. Otherwise, they would have come straight to us, not to the Santa sleighs. It won't be long before they're back here.
What are you going to do with them? He glanced around.
I have an idea.
He hopped out of the car and went to the strand of Christmas lights in front of them. It was the old-fashioned type with large bulbs. He unscrewed one and slipped the earrings inside the socket. Brilliant, Kaylee mused. No one would think to look there, and they could come back in a couple of days to retrieve them. Ethan climbed back in the car and slammed the door.
Now we need to get out of here.
He fiddled with the wires beneath the car before finally the engine started. Do I need to remind you that I'm not going down with you for Grand Theft Auto? Kaylee crossed her arms over her chest.
It's not grand theft if I intend to return the vehicle.
Sounds like a technicality to me. Think a judge would buy that?
Don't worry, I've got connections in high places. Besides, it's for...
The greater good. She cut him off. I know. You've mentioned that before. Despite the stern expression she was trying to maintain, she understood they had little choice in the matter.
Don't worry, I'll fill the tank with gas and return it to them without a scratch. Until then, they can keep Santa's sleighs as collateral.
She couldn't help but laugh at that comment. Ethan grinned, and the next instant, they took off down the road. Tonight was supposed to have been their rehearsal dinner. Instead, they'd be spending it on the run. At least they were together. But was there anywhere they could go where they'd be safe? Ethan's thoughts raced as they headed down the road. He had to figure out where that diamond had gone, but he didn't have any great guesses right now. What are you thinking? Kaylee asked.
I'm trying to figure out what could have happened to that ornament.
Did you come up with anything?
Not yet. You.
Ethan glanced at her. She shook her head, a grim expression on her face. Not really. I mean, the only person who would have done something with it would be either my mom, Richard, or maybe Carson. But I just can't see any of them taking it off the tree.
No one else has been inside the house?
Kaylee let out a sigh. I mean, sure, we've had friends over. We have a lady that cleans the house once a week, but I still have trouble thinking that anyone would take the ornament off the tree on purpose. I mean, it was sentimental to me, but I don't know who else would have wanted it.
When was the last time you saw it on the tree?
Kaylee stared into the distance and rubbed her neck before saying, 2 days ago, I was watching a Christmas movie, and I walked over to look at the tree afterward. It was there. Ethan let out a long breath and stared at the road around him, looking for trouble. A few other cars were out at this time of night, but not many. He turned into a neighborhood and pointed at some houses as they passed by.
Look, you're getting to mark off something else on your list. Christmas lights.
That got a faint smile out of her. They are beautiful. It's the simple things, you know.
Yes, I know, and you're right. They are beautiful.
Suddenly, Kaylee straightened. Her eyes raced back and forth as if she had a thought she couldn't contain.
Kaylee, what is it?
I think I might know what happened to that ornament.
What?
She turned back toward him, her eyes wide. We have to go back to the lodge. Chapter 26. Ethan's heart raced.
What do you mean we have to go back to the lodge?
I told my mom we needed to donate a few handcrafted ornaments to the party at the lodge. A handcrafted Christmas was the theme, and we asked several local artisans if they'd be willing to donate items for the tree. You know I love making a personalized ornament every year, and I usually give them out to my family and friends. A few years ago, I made an ornament that looked like a nativity scene. I have a feeling Mom grabbed the wrong ornament and sent it to the lodge.
You really think it could be there?
Remember all those boxes we saw in that storage room when we got there? I bet it's in one of them.
It's worth checking out. Maybe if they're not able to track us now, we can get there, grab the formula, and...
And what? The thought pressed heavy on him. He should just destroy it, he supposed. What good would it be to hang on to it? He knew the answer, none. If anyone got their hands on that serum, they could use it for evil. That was a chance he couldn't take. Ethan probably should have just destroyed it right away. But his superiors had said that they wanted it. He'd been hesitant to destroy it in case they needed it to make an anti-serum or something. But now he knew that wasn't the case. His career with the CIA was over. Ethan had disobeyed an order. He hadn't even told his boss he still had the formula. He'd said it got destroyed during a fistfight when he'd sneaked into the lab. Said it had fallen into a vat of acid. He headed back toward the lodge, praying that he was making the right decision. But was what he and Kaylee had talked about earlier true? Whichever way they looked at it, could the two of them never be together? He didn't want to believe it, and he was going to do everything within his power to see if he could change things. Kaylee's nerves thrummed with anxiety. She hoped she was right. This was the only thing she could think of that would make sense. That her mom had thought that the nativity was one of the ornaments she wanted to donate. Would trouble be waiting for them at the lodge? Kaylee didn't think so. These guys had no reason to be there. They knew that Kaylee and Ethan were no longer on the premises. They were most likely back at the used car lot tracking the earrings. But she had no idea what would happen next. Even if she and Ethan found that ring and they had the formula, then what? She supposed that would be for Ethan to decide. The two of them were quiet on the road. What else was there to say? Hey, it was fun, but we should never see each other again. Besides, it seemed as if Kaylee would be in danger, no matter how she looked at it. The thoughts continued to rush through her head, and she couldn't fit them together to create the outcome she was hoping for. Finally, nearly an hour later, they pulled back up to the lodge. Everything appeared to be dark. No vehicles were out here except for Ethan's motorcycle with its flat tires. Just as before, Ethan parked around back, and they hurried to the back door. It was unlocked just as they had left it. Slowly, they crept inside.
Where are those boxes?
He asked. Follow me. Kaylee led him around the front desk. The room located behind it was lined with boxes. More than Kaylee had actually remembered. She frowned as she looked at them.
We need to go through all of these?
Ethan asked her. With a shrug, she finally nodded. Yeah, I guess we do. Until we find it. Chapter 27. Ethan and Kaylee had already gone through 20 boxes. They probably still had 30 more to go, Ethan mused. All kinds of items had been packed inside the containers. Items that would be auctioned for the charity event, he supposed. But it was a lot to look through. Almost overwhelming, for that matter.
So that party at Ava's house, it was really nice.
Ethan said.
You did a great job.
Thanks. A small smile tugged at her lips. I enjoy putting events together.
I know. I remember seeing your pages and pages of notebooks for the wedding.
She paused from looking at the boxes. You do know what tonight would have been, don't you? His chest suddenly tightened.
The rehearsal dinner for our wedding.
She nodded somberly. That's right. Ethan started to apologize, but he stopped himself. Kaylee probably didn't want to hear his apologies anymore. Besides, he hoped she now understood the stress he'd been under, the position he'd been in. Was there any way he could ever make things right? He didn't know, but the air around them was suddenly a lot more sorrowful as they continued to search. A few minutes later, Kaylee's breath suddenly caught. Ethan! I think this is it. These are the ornaments from my house. He abandoned the box he was looking through and went to her. She searched through various ornaments before stopping at one. It was a beautiful nativity scene, and there, where the Star of Bethlehem should be, was the engagement ring he'd given her. Kaylee felt tears well in her eyes when she stared at the ornament. When she saw the ring seemed to represent the death of her dreams, while the nativity represented the beginning of redemption. Of course, sometimes the worst moments of our lives were put in place to prepare us for the best that was yet to come.
I'm going to have to take this ring off.
Ethan said, almost apologetically. She nodded. Carefully, Ethan removed the ring from its perch at the top of the stable and slipped it in his pocket. The two of them stood facing each other, the enormity of these events seeming to hit them both. So, now we disappear into the sunset, never to be seen again? We leave with this ring, so no one else finds it? Kaylee said the words partially to be funny, but there was an underlying truth to them as well.
That won't be necessary,
Someone said. The next instant, 4 gunmen flooded the room, led by Luka Novak. Chapter 28. Ethan braced himself as Luka's guys patted him down and took his gun. How had they found them here? It didn't make any sense. Ethan felt certain they'd been tracking them because of Kaylee's earrings. If not, then how?
You think you're so smart,
Luka paced into the room, holding his gun.
but we have connections, you know.
What kind of connections?
Ethan narrowed his eyes.
Powerful ones. People who want a piece of the Christmas pie.
The Christmas pie being a deadly serum that could harm or kill uncountable numbers?
Ethan couldn't believe this guy's ruthlessness. Luka's eyes narrowed.
That formula is mine, and not yours. I paid for it to be created. I get to decide what's done with it, not you. Not the US government, either. Just me.
No one needs that kind of power.
I beg to differ.
He nodded at his guys.
Take her.
Ethan stiffened as the men grabbed Kaylee. Her eyes widened with fear as she stared at him. Ethan! A helpless feeling gripped him, and he hated feeling helpless. The men pushed her into a chair.
Tell me where the formula is.
Luka demanded. Don't do it, Kaylee said. Luka raised his eyebrows.
She's tough. That's good. She'll need to be.
Why?
Ethan didn't want to ask the question, didn't want to know the answer. As one of Luka's guys pointed a gun at Ethan's head, Luka stepped toward Kaylee and pulled something out of his pocket.
Because if you don't, I'm going to cut her fingers off one by one.
Kaylee felt as if she could pass out. Cut off her fingers one by one? She couldn't even think about it.
You don't want to do that.
Ethan said.
Actually, I do.
Luka grinned as if he were enjoying this. How'd you find us? Kaylee asked.
I suppose it doesn't matter if you know at this point.
Luka muttered.
Your friend Ballastar happened to set up cameras here. I guess he didn't tell you. He alerted me when he saw you were here.
Ballister Boulder Ward? Kaylee couldn't believe it.
What? The guy who owns this, his last name is Boulderward?
Ethan asked.
You didn't mention that.
Why would I?
Because one of the agents I work with is Vince Boulderward.
Ethan shook his head.
He's been the inside man.
Wealthy men usually want only one thing, more wealth. I've never met an exception to that rule. Now, enough talking.
Luka motioned to one of his men, and the guy grabbed Kaylee's hand.
Let the fun begin.
Chapter 29. Ethan had to think quickly. Luka grabbed Kaylee's hand and gripped her index finger. Then he raised his pliers. Kaylee's face went white. Ethan's throat tightened.
Wait, if you hurt her, I'll never tell you where I put the formula.
Luka opened the pliers, his expression unchanged.
That's not going to work.
He shoved Kaylee's finger between the jaws. She sucked in a breath before letting out a cry. Sweat spread across Ethan's forehead. He couldn't let this happen. How would he live with himself if he did?
Wait.
He stepped closer.
Okay, I'll tell you. If you promise not to touch her.
Luka pulled the pliers back and raised his eyebrows.
Deal. Now, where is it?
It will be easier if I take you to it.
Luka's eyes narrowed.
Fine. Gary, you stay with the girl. The rest of us will go with Ethan. But you better not be jerking us around.
Of course not.
Ethan stole a quick glance at Kaylee, trying to silently communicate with her. Then he prayed his plan worked. What was Ethan doing? Was he really going to give them the formula? He wouldn't. Nothing made sense. All Kaylee knew was that she could still feel the jaws of those pliers around her finger. still feel the faint slice where the cutters had barely touched her. She never remembered feeling that kind of fear before. She glanced at the man beside her as he stood there stoically. The guy was large and imposing. Could she take him down? Probably not, especially not given her track record. But she couldn't just sit here and do nothing. Her mind raced through the possibilities of what she might be able to do to escape. Fist fight? There was no way she'd ever win that. Tricking him? She was a terrible liar. Attacking him with Christmas ornaments? How effective would that really be? But this was her storage room, the staging room where she had all the supplies she needed to decorate. There was a hot glue gun, garland, Christmas lights. Could she use any of those things? She wasn't sure. She'd have to plug in the hot glue gun before it could do any damage. The garland wasn't thick enough to choke him. The Christmas lights, not bright enough to blind him. Kaylee was going to have to think this through a little more. In the meantime, she prayed that Ethan would be okay. Chapter 30.
Where exactly are you taking us?
Luca barked as they trudged outside. Ethan held up his hands.
You'll see soon enough.
How do I know this isn't a trap?
Out here, I don't even know this area that well.
He let out a grunt. Ethan hoped this plan worked. It was hasty, thrown together, but the stakes were higher than ever. He paused by the lake.
It's out there.
He nodded toward the small pier that led to the tiny island, the one Kaylee had told him about.
Really?
Luca glanced at him skeptically.
It's, tucked into some mistletoe. I thought it was appropriate. I left the formula on a jump drive that I hid inside an ornament. I hung it on a tree the farthest away, on the other side of the island. Go around to the backside and you'll see it.
Luca let out another grunt before nodding to his guys.
If you're playing some kind of game.
His threat hung in the air as the three men darted onto the pier to go retrieve it. Luca pressed his gun into Ethan's temple as they waited. Ethan held his breath, watching to see if his plan worked. If what Kaylee had told him was correct, that pier wouldn't hold up under their weight. They should all end up in the water before they get to the little island. If that didn't work, then Ethan would have to recalculate. Kaylee didn't have any more time to waste. If she was going to act, she needed to do it now. She glanced at a string of lights lying on the floor. If she could just grab that, determination hardened inside her. At once, she turned toward her guard and sneezed on him. She didn't really sneeze, but it sounded real enough. Then she sneezed again. And again. I'm sorry. I'm allergic to evergreen. She sneezed again. The man backed away and looked at her in disgust.
Do you need a tissue?
Yes. Please. I think there's a box over there. She pointed to the table. As soon as he turned, she grabbed the string of lights. Working quickly, she used her expert light skills to wrap the cord around his feet, securing them with a couple of twists sure to tangle him up.
What?
The man glared at her. When he turned toward her, she pulled the string of lights more tightly. As the man raised his gun, she grabbed some specialty spray snow she'd bought. It was an extra thick variety. It was a long shot, but desperate times called for desperate measures. If it's to be, it's up to me. She raised the spray can.
What do you think you're doing?
The man muttered. As he did, Kaylee sprayed the snow at his eyes. He moaned with agony as he began to swipe at his face.
You little...
He stepped toward her, but the lights tangled around his feet tripped him. He fell, and the gun skittered across the floor. Kaylee grabbed it, just in case. She took a step toward the door, then hesitated and glanced back at the man. I'd stay right where you are and keep your eyes closed if I were you, she warned. If oxygen mixes with that spray coating your eyes, you'll go blind. Permanently. I read that on the back of the can. It's one of the cautions it warns about. The man stopped struggling and whimpered. Hoping her little white lie kept the guy from trying to follow her, Kaylee ran out the door. She had to find Ethan. Chapter 31. Ethan continued to watch the men on the pier, praying his plan worked.
You should have never involved yourself in this, you know.
Luca muttered.
Maybe, but I can't sit by and watch people's lives be destroyed.
So noble of you.
He rolled his eyes. The men reached the halfway point on the pier. Ethan held his breath. Nothing seemed to be happening yet. This could all backfire. If they found out the formula wasn't there, they would kill Kaylee. He couldn't let that happen. Maybe there was a way he could help this along.
Hey guys, I forgot to mention, watch out for the rattlesnakes.
Ethan shouted. As the man in the lead stopped mid-step, the guy behind him crashed into his back. Then the third man collided with them both. All three stooges fell onto the pier in a big lump, and the pier suddenly shifted. They all glanced around as if realizing their dire predicament. The second guy yelled at the first.
Snakes hibernate this time of year, you numbskull.
The pier groaned. A rush of bad words floated to Ethan's ears. The piling shifted again. The men, in a tangle of arms and legs, tried to brace themselves. Then the pier collapsed, sending them tumbling into the icy cold water.
What?
Luca yelled.
You've got to be kidding me.
Ethan used the man's distraction to his advantage. He grabbed and twisted Luca's arm until the gun dropped to the ground. Then he kicked it away. Luca faced him, his nostrils flaring. He raised his fists, ready to fight. As he did, Ethan did a roundhouse kick. His foot hit the side of the man's face. Just like that, Luca collapsed to the ground with a moan. Ethan stared at him a moment, waited for him to get up. That almost seemed too easy. He'd expected more of a struggle. Was this really over, this quickly? He wasn't sure, but he needed to check on Kaylee. He grabbed the gun before stepping back toward the lodge. Before he reached the door, someone ran out. Kaylee! She was alive! And okay, and safe. Ethan's heart pounded harder. He never wanted to let her out of his sight again. If only that were possible. She flew into his arms. You're all right! He folded her into him.
I am. How'd you get away?
It's a long story. I'll tell you later. Just then, a helicopter sounded overhead. Another helicopter? Oh no, not another Santa. Kaylee held her breath as she watched the helicopter fly closer. A moment later, it landed in an open field near the lodge. She braced herself for trouble, as did Ethan, who held the gun in his hands. A moment later, 6 men jumped out.
William?
Ethan muttered as he lowered his gun. Who's William? Kaylee still gripped Ethan's arm.
He's a co-worker.
The CIA. That meant the CIA was here. The other men flooded toward Luca and his guys. They pulled the 3 men from the freezing lake. Another put handcuffs on Luca. You'll find another one in the storage room, tangled in lights. Don't be surprised if he won't open his eyes for you, Kaylee told the CIA operatives. Ethan gave her a funny look, then directed them inside to the guy there. William paused in front of them.
How'd you know to come?
Ethan kept his arm around Kaylee.
We've been keeping an eye on you, just in case. We didn't know if you'd taken the formula and tried to sell it to someone yourself.
You think I'd do that?
Ethan sounded offended.
You thought one of us would, right?
William stared at him, giving him a knowing look.
Point taken. I guess in this business, it's hard to know who to trust.
Couldn't be a truer statement made.
William shifted.
We have a lot to talk about.
Ethan glanced at Kaylee.
Yes, we do. But I believe Vince Boulderward is involved with this. I think he sold me out to these guys.
He did. We already arrested him.
Relief softened his shoulders. William held out his hand.
Now, where's the formula? They wouldn't have come after you like this if you didn't have it.
Ethan's jaw tightened. He knew what he needed to do.
I'm going to destroy it.
William narrowed his eyes.
Why don't you let us do that?
Please, let me.
He locked gazes with his colleague as he tried to drive home his point.
I'm the one who's seen what this serum can do. I'm the one who's put everything on the line to stop these guys. I need to know it's gone, that this stuff is no longer a threat.
William stared at him, his jaw twitching with contemplation.
What will I tell Faulkner?
Larry Faulkner was their boss, a by-the-books kind of guy.
Faulkner already thinks the formula was destroyed. The only people who know the truth are the ones on my team. When Luca claims I still have it, no one will believe him.
William stared at him another moment in contemplation. Finally, he nodded and took a step back.
Don't make me regret this.
Ethan released the air from his lungs.
I won't. Thank you.
William offered a tight nod before stepping back toward the team. As he did, Ethan glanced at Kaylee. The two of them needed to talk, in private. He had a feeling Kaylee's escape story would be quite interesting based on what he'd overheard. The guy who'd been left guarding her had been escorted from the lodge, yelling something about going blind if he opened his eyes. He reached into his pocket and felt the ring there. A ring with a hidden formula that had the power to destroy lives. He needed to destroy it as soon as possible. But first, he would wrap up things here. Chapter 32. After the CIA finished with them, Kaylee and Ethan climbed into his friend's car. One of his coworkers let him borrow a vehicle so he could get Kaylee home. They sat in it now, heat running and warming their skin. Christmas music, Blue Christmas specifically, softly played on the radio. After the initial CIA crew had flown in, more vehicles had shown up. From the sounds of it, it wasn't just the CIA. It was the FBI, Homeland Security, local police, and other official-sounding agencies Kaylee had never heard of. Ballastar and his nephew had also been arrested. It seemed as if this was finally over. Once the car was warm, Ethan started down the road. Silence stretched the first few minutes. There was so much to say. Kaylee didn't think either of them knew where to start. Finally, Kaylee cleared her throat. So, how are you going to destroy the formula? Ethan frowned.
I have an idea.
A few minutes later, they pulled up to his apartment and went inside. Ethan opened the door to a back room and displayed a small jewelry-making lab in the closet there.
This was all my dad's equipment.
He explained. Nice. He pulled out several tools before plucking something from beneath the diamond. He then placed the microchip in some acid. Side by side, they watched it dissolve. This was it. The formula was gone. The mistletoe serum would no longer be a threat. Relief washed through her. Could this really be over? Ethan turned toward her, and their gazes caught. Something silent passed between them. Silent but filled with tension. The next instant, their lips found each other's, and the frustration that had lingered between them turned to passion. When the kiss ended, Kaylee buried herself in his arms, loving how safe she felt there. What does this mean for us? I don't think I can handle having my heart broken again. If we can't be together, then we just need to end this. Ethan stroked her back.
Kaylee, Luca and his men are going to be behind bars. I never dreamed we'd be able to cut off the head of the snake. But we did.
And that means...
I feel like we might be out of danger.
Really? Hope filled her.
Really?
So... She pulled away from him just enough to see his eyes. She needed to hear a definite answer. He pushed a stray hair out of her face. Deep emotion welled in his gaze. Regret, affection, longing.
Kaylee, I would love nothing more than to call you my girl. I know I don't deserve it after what I put you through, but...
She tugged on his shirt. I would love that too.
That makes me very happy.
A slow grin spread across his face.
You know, since today is supposed to be our rehearsal dinner.
Yes?
Tomorrow is supposed to be our wedding day. Do you think maybe...
Her eyes widened as she read between the lines. It could still be our wedding day? He shrugged.
It's just an idea. Marry me, Kaylee St. James, now before anything else stands in our way.
Are you for real? He nodded.
Absolutely.
But my mom, she's in Paris.
Actually, I heard through a friend she's not.
What do you mean? Kaylee squinted as she waited for his explanation. What sense did that make? She'd seen the video on the security system of her mom and Richard leaving.
Apparently, they vacated the house and stayed in a hotel in Charlottesville so they could be closer to the area where you disappeared. She was worried.
They didn't go to Paris? Surprise rushed through Kaylee's voice.
They didn't.
Relief filled her. Kaylee hadn't even realized how upset she'd been about that until now.
What do you say about tomorrow?
Ethan stared down at her, his gaze warm and hopeful. Kaylee grinned. She knew a good opportunity when she saw it. I say, let's do it! Then she threw her arms around him, grateful for a second chance. The next day, Ethan stood among the pines and firs at a mountainside Christmas tree farm outside of Charlottesville. It wasn't the same farm where everything had gone down yesterday. This was a smaller place about 20 minutes away. Snow still covered the ground. Lights were strung between the trees, and the scent of evergreen floated through the air. Nearby, a man played soft songs on a guitar. Ethan waited beside his preacher and one of his best friends. White chairs had been set up in neat rows in front of him. Not a lot of chairs, only about 15. Several minutes later, Kaylee emerged from around a row of trees in the distance. She was dressed in the wedding gown she'd originally bought for their ceremony. She hadn't gotten rid of it. She also wore her grandmother's earrings. Ethan had retrieved them. He'd asked her if she wanted him to get rid of the trackers inside. She'd said she wanted to keep them. That way, he'd always know where she was. Kaylee had also made sure Ethan returned Santa sleighs and the borrowed SUV. She'd insisted he included some cash, a new air freshener, a full tank of gas, and a gift card for coffee. The owners of the vehicles had seemed appeased, especially when Kaylee had flashed her bright yet apologetic smile toward them. She had a way of making everything better. She had a way of making him better. Kaylee glowed as she walked toward him. Ethan felt himself glowing also. As "I'll Be Home for Christmas" sounded on the guitar, she walked down the grassy aisle between trees and met him. When they were face to face, she leaned toward him and whispered, "Guess what?
What?
I don't think you're a Grinch after all." Her eyes twinkled. He chuckled before turning serious.
You look beautiful, like an angel.
Kaylee grinned. "And you look quite dashing, like Henry Cavill." His eyebrows shot up.
You think I look like Henry Cavill?
"I do. I've thought it for a while, but I didn't want it to go to your head."
Of course.
He shrugged playfully.
That's always a possibility.
They shared another smile. Then the preacher called everyone together. Kaylee's mom and stepdad, Ava, Ethan's family. Only a handful of people, really. But they were the people who mattered most to them. A few minutes later, Ethan slipped a wedding ring on her finger. Kaylee glanced at it a moment. "Is there anything hidden in this?" she whispered.
No, nothing, I promise.
She slid his wedding band onto his finger. "Too bad I can't say the same thing about yours." His eyes widened. Kaylee winked before laughing. Ethan felt a smile stretch across his face. This was going to be the first of many wonderful Christmases, and he couldn't wait.